So the one thing I can tell you is they're not going to be like us. These things that we're building are not going to be people. And these things that we're summoning into the world now are not demons, but they're not good, they're not evil. The same way that you don't care about an ant is the same way they're not going to care about you. There are entities that are not going to be aligned with what we want.
There's a plan and a scheme to merge man with machines, to reprogram our genes, to replace human beings with something obscene, a transhuman dream, a self-aware robot that can't be redeemed, a puppet on strings with programmable brains, a mixture of iron and clay in its veins, the Lego Man seed with nanotechnologies, and demo the mark of the beast artificially, bypass the boundaries of death and biology. Is it misstop or decay, reverse entropy, quantum computer control powered memories, customized bionic babies in factories, born with androgynous genderless pedigrees, grown with no souls, without an identity, molded identically, all grown synthetically, alchemically, merging their minds with technology, entranced and enthralled, a chance to evolve, a trance that has captured, enchanted them all, a plan that involves transcending the fall, transhumanist movement, translucent cabal, entranced and enthralled, a chance to evolve, a trance that has captured, enchanted them all, a plan that involves transcending the fall, transhumanist movement, translucent cabal, like a morbid assortment of Frankenstein forces, control rigor mortis and zombified corpses, distortions like hybridized flesh-covered cyborgs, assortments of warlocks and sorcerers, shaman imposters who summon up automaton monsters, homunculus minions, mechanical demons. Long ago are their horns and their rattles and chants, or their voodoo-like trances and drumming and dancing. Advanced are the hijinks and latest contraptions, with gadgets and gizmos to sink their distractions, adapting to tap into unmapped dimensions, to overlap quantum and tangled connections. Bizarre spooky action control from a distance, like visitors come to assist us. There is no resistance and no one's suspicious. They're wicked and twisted, magicians and their mission is endless. Entranced and enthralled, a chance to evolve, a trance that has captured, enchanted them all, a plan that involves transcending the fall, transhumanist movement, translucent cabal, entranced and enthralled, a chance to evolve, a trance that has captured, enchanted them all, a plan that involves transcending the fall, transhumanist movement, translucent cabal.
This transition is really, really massively important for our entire species to navigate, and nobody is paying attention. This thing is happening in the background, and underneath it all is this rising tsunami that, if we're not careful, is going to wipe us all out.
And that was Jordy Rose talking about Kindred, his AI technology company that wanted to invite in the AI technology, and that we don't know where it's coming from, but they're bringing us answers from the great unknown, and he was looking for demonologists at the time. But that leads us into a night of fun discussion. I added a little bit to the title because we will be talking just a bit more about Hanukkah tonight, because that's how it goes when news items come up. But in the meantime, welcome, Mr. NPC 3.14.
Hey, I got an echo. I don't know what's going on, but every time something's said, it repeats it.
I have headphones on like usual. I have turned down my main... Oh no, the problem of the echo. Am I going to have to mute myself in between each time I talk?
I'm not real sure. Normally I can't hear the music when it's playing in the beginning, but this time I could.
That is interesting.
So I might have some troubleshooting info. But anyway, I can try to make do without it, but it's constantly doing it. Even when if I keep talking, then it's constantly going back into my ears too.
So there's something on your end that's echoing.
I mean, I don't know. It does it with me or you.
Do you have the sound up on a tab on accident? Do you have a tab open for the video itself and the sound is up on accident?
Oh, yeah. Hold on. That might be why I could hear it this time. Yeah, it's there. Hold on.
That's usually what goes on for me.
All right, I'm so sorry, guys. I don't normally have the video going, but I did it to pop out the chat, and I forgot to
And you
close
forgot.
the video.
Yay! So we figured it out then.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for being a dunce. I just wanted to figure it out before we started going.
Clear things
I
up.
didn't know what was going on.
This is how we clear things up. Quick announcement. Tomorrow, I will be live in the morning at 9:30 my time. Let me get back to my own channel here, so bear with me just a second. I will be live in the morning with BDK and Phil Baker. Phil Baker is the other guy I play his music. So just for those of you who complain or have concerns or don't like the music, well, Phil Baker is not a rapper hip-hop artist, and he has a new song that we're going to be starting the show with. So the show will start with that new song. So if you like Phil Baker, he's not rap, he's not hip-hop. For those rap and hip-hop haters, it will not be that. That will be live at 9:30 Mountain Standard Time, 10:30 Central, 11:30 Eastern, and 8:30 Pacific. You will love this new song. And then on Sunday, Bigfoot birthday special, because it was my birthday NPC on the 8th. And Duke from World Bigfoot Radio, his birthday is tomorrow. So we're going to go, no, not tomorrow, Sunday. So we're going to go live, and he's going to learn us about some Bigfoot topic. What do you say about that? Should be fun. The Bigfoot sound. That's great.
Oh, by the way, Goose the cat that we talked about before. His nickname is Chewy, by the way.
Did you see the cat meme I sent you?
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
I
look at a lot of cat memes.
Well, I sent you a cat meme that said the end is meow.
Oh, yes. I enjoyed that. He had a tinfoil hat on.
Yes, he had a tinfoil hat on. And also, real quick, I was on Zen Garcia on Wednesday night, and I got to talk about my gold and silver business, and that has been a true blessing because I've got to talk to a whole group of people that haven't heard about the business, and that was wonderful because it just was so worth being able to spread this message that I already tell you guys that is, I think, so important that most of you have already signed up, so it's kind of like preaching to the choir. But I got to go on Zen. He gave me the opportunity to go on his channel of several thousand people and talk about why we should be buying gold and silver and the importance of that. And while we got a few negative comments, almost everybody was super positive about it. And I already had somebody sign up with the business because of it, not because of Zen, but they just heard what we said. And we're prayerful people. This is what I love about it, is these people pray. They don't just call me and go, well, convince me. They say, I've been praying for something, and I feel like this is the answer. So there's a praise for that. And yeah, exciting. If anyone wants to listen to that, it was Zen Garcia. It was live on Wednesday night, and we talked about my gold and silver business, and then we went on to talk about the pagan rituals of Christmas. So there, that's it.
Yeah, and that's, another thing is that it kind of has a link to Hanukkah in a sense too. So it's kind of almost like it replaced what we really should be doing, which is Hanukkah, and they left that out of the Bible.
Right.
So there really has been a war on Christmas, only it's been on the wrong date entirely, really.
Mm-hmm. I would say so too, but it was a fun discussion because what I did is, Zen knows a lot more than I do about a lot of things, so I asked some questions, told him what I knew from my little bit of research, and then he just gave us a lot of good answers, and he sounded so much like you'll appreciate this, when he talked about the feast. It was wonderful listening to him explain the feast, because everything he was saying really sounded like everything you've been saying, and I was just
so much wisdom in it. And imagine if everybody learned the feast, everybody would start sounding the same.
Right, and there was just confirmation, such confirmation for me. I was like, this is so great to listen to. It's not surprising, but at the same time it kind of is. I'm like, wow, like this is everything NPC's already been saying, and I love it.
And that's
Zen
the
is just
good
good at
fruit, man.
packaging. That's right. And he talked about that too. And it was just great. Just fruitful for me, fruitful for him, I think. And because he's getting into trying to educate people on money too. And he's kind of interested in crypto, but he's also interested in gold and silver. So we're trying to do both. We're trying to educate people on both things. So
Well, and
anyway,
that's one of the things that's unique about your, well, our rather 7K organization is that they have some type of unique electronic funds deal. That's I don't understand it so well, but you can mention that again if you like, because that is unique.
it is
PayPal
unique.
just started doing something with crypto, but you can't like get it off of that once you buy it. And so it's not really that great. But what we have here with the 7K thing is different.
Right, and I will mention that since you brought it up, because it's not just digital. They actually physically put the silver and or the gold into a vault, and it is audited, and it is insured by what's called Lloyd's of London. You can research that company if you want to. I'm sure you'll find a logo that you hate on it or something, but just bear with the whole thing. It's insured, and it's not federally insured. It's insured by a private company. They have to put the gold and silver. So if I put a whole bunch of dollars, like as you see, I have almost $3,000. Well, you don't see because I'm not sharing the screen, but as people see, I have almost $3,000 in gold and silver in my vault. They physically have to put that gold and silver into the vault, and if they don't, then they're audited, and the auditor says, well, you're not meeting these requirements, and they could get in trouble. But so they obviously meet the requirements, and then it is secured with an armed security guard 24/7. Probably not the same guy 24/7, probably a few different people. And what you can do is it looks digital, but it's not because they're physically vaulting it for you. If you want your silver, you can say, send me my silver. If you want your gold, you can say, send me my gold. Or if you want to turn it into cash and use it, I should show you guys this, but I can't. I can't show you. Dang. Because it gives out my debit card number and everything. But you can use it on a debit card physically in your hand when you cash it out, or you can use that as a debit card. It gives you the online option where you just, for instance, if I wanted to go to Amazon, I could use the online debit card numbers to buy anything online. Obviously, I'm not swiping the card, anywhere else, but you can use it online, and it's a not chipped debit card. So anyway, you could turn it from cash to gold to silver to cash instantly. Like you said, nobody else is doing that.
Yeah, it's totally unique.
AppMex is not doing that. JM Bullion's not doing it. SD Bullion's not doing it. Scottsdale Mint is not doing it. Sunshine Mint is not doing it. Perth Mint, name a mint, none of them are doing it. So, yeah, that's a huge part of the benefits of being a member. And that wasn't even, we didn't even have this a year ago.
And honestly, that alone is enough of a reason to be a member, because that's a pretty cool service. Because see, with PayPal, sure, you can convert funds to Bitcoin and have it on your wallet, but it's speculative. It's still so speculative. I mean, Bitcoin, yeah, might be really high priced right now, but the thing is, Bitcoin was never supposed to be an investment like that. It was never supposed to be a store of value.
It was supposed to be money.
Yeah, it's just supposed to be, you want as many people as possible to have it, and they're never going to if the price is sky high. In which case, what makes it so much better than Satoshi or Doge even, So I understand there are all these differences with the cryptos, but when you get down to gold, like you're talking about right here, that's a lot easier to switch in and out, and it's not so speculative. It's not as volatile, and you can move the money out, whereas you can't do that with the PayPal thing. So even though what they're doing with the PayPal thing sounds real innovative right now, it's only useful if you want to just sell your Bitcoin. It's
Which is
silly.
a really good point, because when these guys wanted to make this happen, they said they went to some bankers, and the bankers were like, no, that's not how we want to do things. We're bankers. And so we're not going to help you with that technology. And then when they finally just got it figured out with some different bankers that were willing to do this kind of stuff, the original people, allegedly in Silicon Valley, were like, well, now we want that technology. And these guys were like, nope, sorry. So
And they'll have to pay an arm and a leg for someone to
Yep.
code it for them and stuff
that's
now.
right. That's
But
right.
yeah, I just, from all the things I hear, that was one of the things that stuck out to me. So I just wanted to make sure. Thanks for mentioning it.
Yeah, so moving on to your real quick, everybody, I did want to talk about, and I know that NPC knows I want to talk about this, but what I did want to talk about was, if you haven't seen the video, I didn't pull the video up, but I can, of this doctor who is very excited about his cure now, which the first cure, as we know, for the Fauxvid was hydroxychloroquine. But now this video, and I'm not going to show the whole thing. I'm just going to link it. I'm merely opening it so that I can link it. This doctor is so adamant that his cure is ivermectin. And as soon as I heard it, I thought, man, ivermectin, that's an antiparasitic. Do you remember us talking about that? I didn't know you do. You remember us talking about that in the
Yeah, for
past?
the anti-malarial.
Right. So we've got hydroxychloroquine and now ivermectin as being these cure-all drugs for the Fauxvid, which is so odd because I thought it was a virus, not a parasite.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. The foreign bodies of the influenza, meaning giant. I mean, who knows what it really is, right? And besides that, the quote vaccine shouldn't even be bearing the name vaccine either, because it's not the traditional vaccine. Now, I think they should use the word inoculation or something like that for it. There's a lot of name games being played right now, and I think they're pulling the wool over our eyes. I got the ivermectin link up, by the
Yeah,
way. I
share
got a
if you want to share
wiki
your
link.
screen. I'm just ready for
Yeah, this
that.
is all new to me, so I can read about it here. I'm sharing the screen. There it is, the ivermectin. Meow meow. And commencing screen share. It seems
And
to
also
be
recall, everybody,
working.
that it is working. Recall that they have not isolated any microorganism of any Fauxvid novel type 2, whatever, SARS. They have not isolated any microorganism, and the CDC says so. I've proven that. I've shown that in the Discord. If anybody wants it, come to the Discord. Doc or Rockman will drop the link. But anyway, go ahead with what you're showing us.
You mean they haven't identified a vector? What
They
was
have
you
not
saying exactly?
isolated the microorganism of what's called Fauxvid SARS-CoV-2. They have not isolated that. They've not isolated it from a single patient, which means it's not out there as anything that we can prove at all.
So, oh yeah, because I've been learning a little more about the PCR tests and how those they're really basically they're testing for AIDS, because which would make sense, because if COVID has AIDS in it, so there's another possibility that if it is real, no pun intended, that maybe in fact that's what's going on.
So
So it could be dormant.
your positive test could mean positive AIDS or
Because it has
HIV.
those 18 fragments of AIDS inside the COVID virus itself, which so it makes sense why it's not really showing up as COVID, because COVID's synthetic. It only has these other markers of other viruses that are known. In other words, it in itself is a chimera virus, and I think that it can be reprogrammed probably using AI. Now, there's some people out there that say the 5G itself will be able to modulate the virus and change it too. So I don't know if that's true. That could be getting out there, but who knows? At the very least, I think it can be programmed and distributed. And if did we ever show the FunVax video?
I
Pretty sure
don't
we did
think
that a few weeks
fun
back.
vax.
Yeah, the fundamentalist vaccination. Man, if we haven't shown that, we
I
really
don't know
should
that we have.
sometime. In other words, they had there's video you can find on YouTube, and basically it's this fella I think he's like from the Department of Defense or something like that, and he's up there talking about how they were going to weaponize a flu virus or rhinovirus and basically going to insert components into the genetic line of the virus itself in order to inoculate people and turn off their genes that help them connect to God. In other words, the fun part of the vax was for fundamentalism. So they were going to target the Middle East in this example. Of course, what's going to stop the virus from spreading worldwide? Or why should they stop with one religion and not the other? You see what I mean? Like, hey, that right there is a basket of crazy. And they were talking about that in 95. So,
Oh, good. Well,
AIDS is the least of our worries.
somebody did say
honestly.
that there was a report that when they got the vaccine trial that they felt like God had left them or
Exactly.
something like that. God was no longer
So,
with them.
so it shouldn't come as a surprise. I mean, not everybody believes in God. Some people may not even notice. But those who did, I mean, can you imagine the feeling of having that experience after you were maybe already like, oh, I don't know about this, and then after that being like, oh, something's different, you know? Yeah, that's probably how the angels felt too when they fell, or Adam and Eve. Um,
Maybe.
so anyway, I'm not trying to be like gloom and doom, but I personally think that it's worth it to do. Let me see if there's a link on this real quick, because I don't
Well,
want people to think I'm
it may
full
very
of
well be
crap.
gloom and doom if you get the vaccine. And we're not talking forced. We're not talking held down, strapped down, because I think God is even above that. What I think is if even you're pressured into the vaccine, that you've accepted something that you shouldn't. So I'm not talking about strapped down and forced to take it. So it will be gloom
This
and doom for anyone who accepts this vaccine.
the very first one here is a
Comes right
Snopes, of
up.
course.
Snopes.
Um, okay, so pardon me, I didn't actually plan to talk about this, so I didn't have a thing up. Yeah, here it is. There it is. Yep. This is probably it, guys. Well, let me just see. I don't have sound going to boom and out, so it's just in my headphones. If this is the link, I'll drop it for you guys. Yeah, this is it.
On the left over here,
So
we
he's got the
have
DoD ID
Oh,
there,
yes.
too, so you
individual
can probably look it up.
religious fundamentalists, religious
This
fanatics, and
is
this is the
probably,
expression,
if it's not already part
RT-PCR,
of
real-time
O
PCR
or whatever we're calling
expression of the VMAT2
it,
gene.
if it's not already
Over
part of
here,
ours,
we have individuals.
it's probably
So,
part
so,
of Vax.
so let me complete. So over here,
Oops,
we have
lost the
individuals
chat.
who are not particularly.
Did
You
you
still
want to
with
just
me?
play that?
Oh, it was
I
playing
could.
through my headphones,
Oh, I
not
could hear it.
my
I can hear it.
speakers.
If I can
Oh,
hear it,
word?
everyone else can hear it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to be an idiot again.
Well, how would you know?
I don't know, man. I don't know. All right, let me get that back up. Fun vax. There we go. Well, cool. I don't know how that was working, but
Yeah,
I still
it
lost
was.
my chat though. I'll try
Excuse me.
to.
On the left over here, we have individuals who are religious fundamentalists, religious fanatics, and this is the expression, RT-PCR, real-time PCR expression of the VMAT2 gene. Over here, we have individuals. So let me complete. So over here, we have individuals who are not particularly fundamentalists, not particularly religious, and you can see there's a much reduced expression of this particular gene, the VMAT2 gene. Another evidence that supports our hypothesis for the development of this approach. What you see
here is by spreading this virus, we're going to eliminate individuals from donning on a bomb vest and going into a market and blowing up the market.
So our hypothesis is that these are fanatical people, that they have overexpression of the VMAT2 gene, and that by vaccinating them against this, we'll eliminate this behavior. So we have some very, very remarkable data in this next slide. Here we have two brain scans. These are fMRIs. These are two different individuals with different levels of expression of VMAT2. On top is an individual who's a religious fanatic, an individual, and we've repeated this numerous times, that has high levels of VMAT2. Now, This individual down here who had low levels of the VMAT2 gene, this individual would self-describe as not particularly religious. In each case, these individuals were read a religious text. This individual lit up the right middle frontal gyrus, shown here, and that's a part of the brain that's associated with theory of mind. It's a part of the brain that has to do with intents and beliefs and desires. In marked contrast, here's an individual who would not particularly self-describe as religious, and when they're read a religious text, what you see is that this part of the brain called the anterior insula lights up. This is a part of the brain that's associated with disgust or displeasure on hearing something.
So you're suggesting I take a CT scan with me when I'm evaluating people to determine whether I put a bullet in their head?
So the that I'm presenting
A
here
shot.
supports the concept that we're proposing, and I think that we would not propose to do CT scans or fMRIs on individuals out in the hinterlands of Afghanistan. The virus would immunize against this VMAT2 gene, and that would have the effect that you see here, which is it's essentially to turn a fanatic into a normal person. And we think that will have major effects in the Middle East.
How would you suggest that this is going to be dispersed? The aerosol?
Well, so the present plan and the tests that we've done so far have used respiratory viruses, such as flu or viruses, and we believe that that's a satisfactory way to get the exposure of the largest part of the population. Most of us, of course, have been exposed to both of those viruses, and we're quite confident that this will be a very successful approach.
This is fascinating. What's the name of this proposal?
Yeah, so the name of this project is FunVax, which is the vaccine for religious fundamentalism.
And you have a proposal already?
That proposal has just been submitted, and I think that the data that I have shown you today would support the development of this project, and we think it has great promise.
There you have it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought it was 95. It was 05. So
Close enough.
I was mistaken there. But yeah, I mean, that right there says it all. If you want to comment real quick, I'll try to find your video and get the chat back.
Oh yeah, I have seen that, which is kind of funny, so to speak, because I didn't realize I must not have watched it to the end. I probably just got disturbed and just left it alone. But I felt like I had gotten the gist, and I do remember it now. But it had been so long since I had watched it that I forgot it was supposed to be based on like Islamist quote unquote fanaticism. I had forgotten
Well, that's the foot in the door. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, oh, we're trying to stop terrorism, and yet they're not. They're trying to really stop our... So when I made the video on the black gold ascension, and I said that they were going to bring in that third strand DNA, that the way that it will be the mark of the beast, it will finally detach us physically, because we have God-made DNA. It will detach us from God because it will be a different DNA, which is what Satan has been trying to do since the garden, which is why I believe there was a sexual interaction in the garden. You don't have to believe that. Nobody has to believe that. But that's why it made sense to me. I said, he's been trying to corrupt our DNA since then. And we can see that with the Nephilim and the fallen angels, obviously. And with what they're trying to do with the bloodlines and things like that. So it's an obvious desire to corrupt the DNA fully and completely, even kind of against our will, because we're going to say yes because people are of the world and it's hard to see the kingdom when you're here. But we, you and I and everybody in the chat, has had to think about this. What are we willing to give up? We have to be willing to give up everything to have salvation with the Lord, even our own children, our own families. This is why somebody reported me as self-injurious, and they thought I was suicidal and homicidal, because I said,
I've gotten that before.
do you remember the movie? Do you remember the movie The Mist, where these creatures were
Yeah.
attacking Earth and they were killing everybody, and the guy had his 2 kids and another lady with him, and at the end of it they drive out in a Jeep or whatever, and because they don't want to be killed by the creatures, he shoots everybody in the car. And right before he shoots himself, the military comes in and saves the day. So
Ouch.
devastating. But here's the thing is, we've all had to think about that. This is why I was accused of being suicidal and homicidal. And they're not going to get anywhere with that because I went very public about that after that happened and police came to my door. I said what I said was, are we going to try to take matters into our own hands because we're afraid of what they'll do to us on this earth? Or are we going to trust the Lord Jesus Christ, who our salvation comes from, and our afterlife is so much more important than what happens here, even though it's going to be possibly horrific, and we don't want to go through it. Even if we have to watch our kids go through something we don't want to watch, we can't do like in that movie where we just take the matters into our own hands. We have to face whatever it is that's coming, and that's hard to think about. But if we don't think about it, we're not ready. We don't have our lanterns prepared if we don't think about that.
Yeah, and that's a really good point because, it when they were fleeing, they did exactly what they should have done, fled in like the forest, but they didn't have the faith underpinning them. They were just going on fear.
Yes.
Well, and I think that's awfully poignant too, because this time of year, this Hanukkah season, is really a tale for a future generation. And this is why Jesus referred to it and said that pray that your departure not be in the winter or on the Sabbath, of which Hanukkah is both. So I think it's an interesting thing to bring up because it was only those who stayed in Babylon and didn't divorce from the ways of her that were slain. There's supposed to be salvation offered to those that overcome, and the days are cut short lest there be no flesh left. I mean, the plan that they're going to enact would be 100% successful if they're allowed to unfold it completely. And it says that it will only be cut short by Yahweh to simply prove that, he is God. Not saving us for our sake, but saving for his name's sake, right? And like you said, so the only thing that protects us is the name of God, and see his salvational aspect, his merciful aspect is Yeshua. That's his son that was provided. Jehovah is what that means, is salvation. He provides that salvation because he destroys too. The right hand creates and the left hand destroys. And the wages of sin are death. And, we all fall short of the glory. So that's why faith in Christ and that sacrifice is what saves us, because it's that merciful aspect. And Jesus himself refers to this departure from Babylon. And really, that is, I'm not saying that this is the rapture, but in a sense, it is a rapture because it's also the gift of prophecy, which is the gift of prophecy is just that. It's a future present. And it's for those in that generation to open and receive that gift. And it hasn't matured. It's a piece of fruit. But anyway, I heard another guy doing a sermon about the fig tree, and he's talking about how, the Lord of the vineyard is coming back to inspect fruit. And we have to be found with as laborers, filled with his virtues, sowing his gospel, producing a good fruit. And those are the people that are saved because they're his laborers. And part of that is also, remembering the feasts. And Christ kept all these feasts. He paid the price of the sacrifice for all of these feasts. So there's great hope and salvation. That's the only thing that saves us is that, and being workers. Otherwise we're just part of the tares, and we're eating from the wrong tree. So the guy that I was listening to in this respect, he was talking about the fig tree and how when Jesus cursed it, it only had leaves, it didn't bear fruit. And it was a shade tree from the sun.
And so the light of the sun couldn't reach anybody sitting under it. because it was just for shade. It didn't bear fruit. And he was hungry when he went to the tree. So he's coming to get our fruit, you know. And so if we don't have fruit, he curses us from the root and you dry up, right? And it's those trees that are burn up, right? So that ties a lot in with the parable of the wheat and the tares, the parable of the vineyard, like we covered in Matthew 20. And Matthew 24:32 talks about the parable of the fig, and Mark 13, Luke 21. So I think that Hanukkah resembles this too, because by departing into the wilderness, you are among the trees. You have become that fruit that is saved. Jeremiah was talking about, you know, summer has come and, you know, we're not saved. But, you know, I don't know if he meant that just the prophecy hadn't been fulfilled in that generation or what he was referring to, but it becomes true for some generation. And we were told that the fig tree generation would be this. So Christ comes back as a wind to shake all the trees, right? And then whether the fruit's ripe or not, it falls out. But if a tree only has leaves, you know, then it's cut down just the same. Sorry for being long-winded. I didn't plan to do a soliloquy like that, but but I'm just got real excited about Hanukkah, because at first I thought it was not important. I didn't understand it. And then as I was getting involved with the feast days and practicing and trying to keep them, and then I learned about Hanukkah. And, you know, well, the first tabernacles that we were talking about, Sukkot, back in September,
Mm-hmm.
that one was the dedication of the first temple that Solomon built, right? And so that had its own cornerstone, and then we had the second temple being built, and that's the one Cyrus helped with, which is who Trump is being compared with in some regard. That dedication seemed to take place a little later. And so that's why Hanukkah, as we may, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even have anything important on the screen. That is why Hanukkah was chosen as a date, because after the Maccabean revolt, they chose the date of the second dedication as the date for Hanukkah, as a rededication or a Hanukkah, which is what that word means. So this has been a lot of fun to learn about, because the bride of Christ, the body of Christ, is the third temple. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to build a physical one, but that's the point. That wouldn't be the real one. The Spirit of Yahweh would only live in the people that have, you know, faith in Christ. Because they'll be keeping the sacrifices and stuff, but in a different way, right? They're going to be rejecting the Messiah still, doing blood sacrifices. So that's why we've been keeping an eye on the red heifer and that kind of thing. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of say why this is so important to me, because this has really opened a lot of things up in the Bible for me to understand these things. And why it was left out, I think, was a weaponization of the word against us, you know, by leaving out that a very important story about Maccabees. If we were learning about this in Sunday school, we'd be growing up, you know, Christians would have a totally different mindset, I think. We'd always be watching for it, right? That's what a watchman is.
Right.
And so if we don't warn people, their blood are on our hands. That's probably think about how the people in the wilderness felt when they slew those Grecian or the Greek, you know, priests that were slaying that pig on the altar. And they said, hey, if you serve Yahweh and his laws, follow me. And they went into the wilderness. And so I actually had I know we're supposed to be talking about that medication, but just bear with me, please.
Yeah, let's talk about that later if it comes up. Go where you're going.
But anyway, there is this gentleman here I needed to talk about, and it was the father of Judas Maccabee. And in fact, I think, yeah, right here. It is this guy here. I want to talk about him real quick, because this is the dude that did it. And, you know, I want everybody if you're listening to this and you understand what I'm saying,
like you get it. You had the ears to hear. You know, we're Maccabees, right? Meow, in my opinion. So like that's why this story resonates. So listen to this. So this guy here, his name is Matthias ben Johann, and so he was the priest whose role in the religion-driven Maccabean revolt against the Hellenistic. Remember, this was those who mixed. The Hellenistic Jews were basically those in Babylon still, right? They mixed. Seleucid Empire is related to the Book of Maccabees. Mattathias is accorded a central role in the story of Hanukkah, and as a result is named in the Al-Hasnissim prayer Jews add to the Birkat Hamazon, which means grace after meals, and the Amendah during the festival's 8 days, which, by the way, we would light the first candle today, but would actually be the second.
So I should light my first candle today. Oh.
Well, the first one is the servant candle. So technically 2, because you use the one to light the others. It serves the others. So you would have 2 actually lit, but yeah.
All right, because if anyone didn't hear, I got a menorah from my mom for my birthday with candles.
And one thing I wanted to note, just because I keep noticing, and I'm not trying to be hypercritical, because I myself am using candles here at the house, but what I've noticed is that the original menorahs were they used oil, and so just remember that when we're talking about this, think about the wise and foolish virgins, right? And they had their lamps and oil. So we kind of lose something when we do have the candles. So remember that it goes back to the oil, because there's also this tale that's not proven in the text, but they say that there was a miracle also on Hanukkah, and that the flask of oil that they found after the Maccabean revolt lasted for 8 nights, because it was going to take them some time to actually manufacture new oil. However, and remember, there's feasts, little times in there that talk about like new oil, new wine. These are all things that are used for the temple services, by the way. So it was going to take them some time to make the new oil, but they found among the rubble a flask of oil, and then it lasts 8 days when it should have only lasted 1. Now that may not be true, but that's the story that is kind of told during this time. But the fact is, they did use oil. Now here's another thing that I want to get out real quick. They didn't have enough gold, because whenever Antiochus Epiphanes was, his whole reason for really messing with them in the first place was because he was trying to Hellenize his entire kingdom, right? He was trying to make it all the same, homogeneous, and because he thought that would help him rule it more effectively. And so one other thing he had done was he stripped all the gold out of the temple, right? So they didn't even have a golden menorah. And so after this Maccabean revolt took place and they finally took back Jerusalem, instead of making a menorah of gold, they made a menorah of iron. Okay. And I find that this is very strange because, when we go to Revelation 12 and it's talking about this child that'll be born, and it'll be given a rod of iron. I just found that very interesting, because it's almost as if it's referring to this Maccabean-esque thing, and as the bride of Christ, as it were, the remnant. Will it have to flee into the wilderness to then be harvested by Yahweh? And is the rod of iron this menorah of iron that will subdue the nations? Is it this stone in Daniel that strikes the feet of the statue and breaks it apart, and it's swept away like the chaff in the wind? I mean, all of these parables start to really line up when you get into the feast days. And Hanukkah is it's the lampstand. It's the stand for all the others. So in a way, it's
the cornerstone, in a sense, almost for all the others. And that's why it wasn't really obvious to me, because it wasn't really included as a flame. It is the lamp stand.
Yes.
It's just
Yes.
as important as the rest of it.
Absolutely.
So in a time of great darkness, there was light. And that's where we get the festival of lights, because Jesus is the lamp that lights our way. He's the word. And so if we keep his word and we keep these feasts, these are all to remind us of all the times Yahweh led his people out of captivity with tabernacles, and the Passover with the gift of Christ, Pentecost, and the Spirit descended on all the prophets. So, all of these stories help remind us of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and being led out of captivity. Deuteronomy reminds us to remember we were captive once. And if we don't remind ourselves of that, and we mix in and we become Hellenized, we're led back into captivity. And we can see that one of the characteristics of this Antiochus character, he had his own currency. See, it bore his image. We were just talking about money and how this house of cards, it's been artificially sustaining the world economy here, is going to collapse, folks. And when it does, we're going to see this type of thing manifest, which is what epiphanies means.
Right.
It will manifest suddenly. And, we're going to see this character appear, and he's going to test everybody's faith, by forcing his own lawlessness upon the world. And this is why I've been keeping an eye on somebody like Gregory Hallett, for instance, because he's got that Aramaic prayer for the New Age, and he's Hellenizing Christianity, as it were, to incorporate this New Age stuff, and a little bit of leaven spoils the loaf.
Right.
So that's why we Feast of Unleavened Bread is so important. So I think the feast days in and of themselves are very important, because it helps us chip away at the parts of ourselves that we need to get rid of, and it helps us become more Christ-like, because he too kept the feast. And he refers to Hanukkah when he talks about the end generation. So salvation, in a sense, is provided by those that keep the word. So I think there might be some other types of rapture, but think of the joy you would feel just by not being in Babylon when this judgment takes place. It's as bad as it could be out in the wilderness. It's not going to be as bad as it would be spending eternity in hell.
And we were created to know how to live in the wilderness. We were created to know how to go out and live, and not, these survival shows are funny to me, because I'm like, we should all be able to go out and survive and thrive off of the land. And sadly, it's become so foreign that it's now like a show on who can do it the longest, because it's really, really, really hard for us to contemplate or even imagine being able to do anymore. It's just not even it's almost not part of our DNA anymore. Like, we've been corrupted already, but we're not gone.
Well, and that's the whole point of the remnant.
Right.
It's just what's left. And so he's testing his fruit, right? And that's why if you just become saved, even just like, let's just say somebody hears the gospel for the first time, and they're like, oh, yes, I really like how I feel about this. Yeah. And then, well, how much time does their fruit have to mature before the Ruach comes and shakes his tree or her tree? I mean, that's the point. We want to educate people as soon as possible to let them know about things like this, because, the harvest will take place, and you want to be able to have as much fruit as you can, But the thing is, this character here is going to be a rod of wickedness that's allowed to bloom and carry out this big tribulation. This is going to be, as he refers to himself here,
God Manifest is what he changed his name to. So, this character is going to be allowed to enter on the stage and fulfill this role. And, God's salvation is that red thread, as we see in Joshua 2 with the story of Rahab, the household that took care of the spies. They were offered salvation as a red cord through the window that marked their home. That was the kind of same thing that occurs with Passover, when the angel of death passed over the homes with the lamb's blood on it. These were occasions when the judgment occurred and they were still in the cities, and so they were having to flee. This particular case, Hanukkah, is a time when they had to flee. And so I think that, that's the big distinction here, So it's only it's most painful for those that are most wed to Babylon. It's not going to be easy for anybody unless they're a native. And see, this is where I really started to gain a lot of respect for the Native Americans and their connection to Yahweh, because there are some tribes that actually use that name, and they talk about how they had encounters with the law of Moses and things like that. I've seen some really interesting content on there, and this was a Cherokee fella talking about it. But I've actually met a Sioux chief in person when I was at the Serpent Mound in Ohio, and he talked to me about Christ and how he had appeared to everybody as a light body and was teaching them the gospel.
That's amazing to hear, because you know how many people want to argue that, well, the natives have it all figured out. They understand the land, and they do understand some things about the land, but they think like because they understand the land or the way that they do things and have been doing things, that it's the right way. And I have to say we have to be careful, because a lot of the native beliefs in gods and even their devils, I don't know if they'd call them devils, but they have some of the creepiest evil spirits that they still interact with along with their normal spirits that they call on. And it's incredibly, terrifying, like the skinwalkers and the Wendigo and things like that, and very prevalent in the Native American culture, which is equal to a lot of the things we see in Greek and Roman mythology as well with their gods. And so when people say, well, we think the Indians have it all figured out, and I hear this all the time, natives, whatever you want to call it, don't go PC on me, but we think they have it all figured out, except for they think it's unfair if Jesus hasn't presented himself to them, and yet you're telling me now that there is known presentation of Jesus Christ to the natives.
Oh yeah. And I want to share this story because I don't know if I ever have, and it was so compelling. He had a family with him, and I was actually on the watchtower looking out over the Serpent Mound, so you could gain some perspective. And so I'm standing up there by myself, and they all come up the stairs and get to the top, and very friendly and talking and stuff. And I gave him some frankincense and myrrh, and I like to keep it in a pouch when I travel sometimes, and it's a way to witness to folks, And when I did this, I gave him some of that. He gave me in exchange, he gave me some bitter root, and I think another piece of stone, and he just kind of lingered. And then while everybody else departed downstairs, he stayed there with me. And it wasn't until everybody else had left, he just kind of looked at me and he said, "Do you have native blood in you?" And I was like, "I don't know. I mean, maybe. Everybody likes to say that they do, right?" But I honestly don't know. So I just told him, I was like, "Well, maybe. Either way, I have a lot of respect for the ways." And he said, "Well, I'm going to tell you something. We're not supposed to talk about this outside of our tribe, but I wanted to let you know because I mentioned Christ, and so he told me the story of how his tribe preserved this story that Christ had appeared to them, but as a light body, and he ministered to them, and he said that they were in what was considered the Garden of Eden, and it was going to be taken soon by the other tribes. And
Makes you
so
almost
was
feel
all
like, is this a
prophesized.
pre-Adamite thing or what? I'm not sure.
Well, you find a lot of, and I've been doing a lot of digging about it. Once the tribes began to get dispersed, there's a lot of folks to support that the tribe of Gad is just one of many native Jewish tribes that made their way over here, apparently, because they were all seafaring. So, it was really the edges of all of the lands that they occupied. And so really, that's kind of how things started out here in North America. It was, I guess they were just already on the edges and they kind of worked their way in. But, we covered that about the Decalogue stone, for instance, that prior to even this country starting, we know there were people here.
Absolutely.
And a lot of it was religious in nature. So I think that what happened is this land was seeded with the more, a more pure bloodline, perhaps, that was not as corrupted. I don't know how to look at it exactly, but I'm just trying to look at it the way the Creator would look at it. So in the context of fruit, maybe they, some of these tribes, just like the Jews, as the 12, there was actually 14 total, but 12 officially. And then if you count Benjamin, I guess, then maybe 13 there added to the 12. But anyway, you just have that same thing with the natives, right? You got different tribes. Maybe some were more in line with the truer teaching and some fell out, just like Dan, for instance. But I think overall, they had the more spiritual understanding that maybe was a fruit that Yahweh was looking for instance. Because, he had his plan after all. We can't pretend to know it. But I can understand, like, if they could follow your directions a little more easily because they have the ears to hear, they maybe don't have the eyes to see because they're not using the same religious texts, right? So I would just be curious to study the populations of maybe Native American Jews, people that become Jewish essentially through their communion with Yeshua as their Messiah, like Messianic Jew Native Americans would be an interesting population.
I wonder how big that group is.
Well, I bet it would surprise you because really if you're a native, if you're born somewhere, you're a native. So if you become Jewish, you're already set apart as a peculiar people. So, really you're everywhere. And I think that was always the plan, was to keep his seed preserved. They are everywhere. All the tribes are scattered. And so when we look at things like Isaiah 11:11, it talks about there will be a second time he'll recover his remnant from all the nations and islands in the sea, which I think includes North America. So, because we weren't really originally part of what was considered the world. We're the new world. So I think that we would be part of that islands. And because that's where all the tribes are mixing too, right? So I don't know. It's really interesting. But when you start looking at people as trees and how the Creator has bred us over time and how Hasatan, his goal is to pollute that bloodline. Imagine if you were, a lot of people breed dogs or breed horses or, I don't know, breed whatever. Even with tomato plants, if you get some cross-pollination, it's like, oh, my prize heirloom.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Strain or whatever. Monsanto's GMO ruined my crop. Farmers are having that problem right now. That's the Matthew 13 epitomized. Master, what shall we do? The enemy sowed tares among our wheat. And that's why it says, wait till the harvest. And how can we tell wheat apart from tares, Aaron? We've talked about that before.
Because they don't have fruit on the tares.
Yeah, but the wheat bows
they
its
bow.
crown.
Because they have fruit,
Yeah.
right? They're probably heavier.
Meow, meow. Yeah, they're more dense, maybe with the
So
seeds,
they bow.
perhaps.
That's right.
Yeah, maybe they have more.
I would have
they're
gotten
more
that trivia
fruit.
half right.
It's a difference in fruit, you know. One
Yes.
has just leaves and the other doesn't.
Right. So
The one
I was half right.
other has fruit. So what is fruit? I've been talking a lot about fruit, right? So fruit is oh man, I get so excited. I got another Native American thing, and this ties right into it.
Let's hear it.
So okay, so you know, Yahweh gives us in his word, he talks about the branch, right? He talks about this branch and this stone. You know, in Isaiah 11, you know, we're seeing this branch from the stem of Jesse and the root of David. This branch that will provide shade, right, to the people. It's going to be gathering all these folks from all the nations, and this is going to become a sign for you know, this remnant that'll be forming, right? And so it got me thinking, we're all warriors in a spiritual manner, you know. Yahweh takes care of our adversaries, right? In a lot of these cases, these prophets and such and disciples, they were told to go without any money, you know. And here, I myself am even like, I got MREs and ham radios, kosher
Oh,
ham
speaking of, I
radios.
just bought my ham radio. I didn't know had to be kosher. I didn't know about this.
Just a
Great.
joke.
Okay, good, because I'm like, just bought my
Ham.
ham radio
It was-
walkie-talkies. Oh, ham.
it
Oh,
was-
ha ha ha. Ha. I didn't catch it. So, okay, go on. But yes, congratulations to me for getting those finally.
Oh, and just a little side note on ham radio. I learned that CBs don't require a license, whereas the ham does, particularly 8-watt hams.
Yes, but it's
you
an
got.
easy test, and then that way you can transmit all over the U.S. or further.
Oh yeah. I was just making sure to add that. But yeah, it's a really cool thing to have, and they're really affordable. But I digress. So my point was that, you know, we can have all the stuff piled up and stuff, but if we end up being raptured, whether that's caught up in the sky, harpazo, which just really means he holds us tight, we're being hugged, you know, to the breast of Yahweh. Well, whether that's literally in the sky or not, or in the wilderness, either hug a tree, right? Either way, you're not going to be around all the stuff you have at your house. You know, that's going to be for somebody else that is under tribulation, probably. So I was thinking a lot about this. You know, plan as if you are going to share it anyway. That's the whole point of it. And leave a Bible explaining all this stuff. So maybe somebody will get saved while you're out in the wilderness. Someone's in your stash and being like, "Oh man, they knew what was going on." And then just think of all the people that are just going to get saved from that. But if you just find all this stuff, you're just going to be like, "Yeah, woohoo!" But you know, hey, if you leave it like you're going to be saving somebody, you know, maybe they'll meet you out in the woods. And which is exactly how it was a quiet place. That's how that ended.
A quiet place, yes.
They were given a bow, you know, and that's what the conquering horse, you know, with the crown, he has a bow also. And so anyway, I really got off.
You were going to tell another Native American story.
Oh yeah, thanks, man. So yeah, so we're warriors, right? And so one of these, having that mindset about this, it opens something up. The branch is also used in Navajo tactics, right? And so what they would do back in these times, and this is not just them, it's all over, but you would write a message on a strip of leather, and then you would wrap it around the branch. And if the other person that you were sharing this with, they had the other half of your branch. And so when you sent your message, it would have all sorts of other symbols and letters or whatever on it, but only the other person with your matching branch could wrap it around their branch and read your message. So the question is, in Deuteronomy, it tells us to, you know, the tefillin goes between our eyes, right?
and we are to wrap the law. That was what's on the other strap is the law. It's the message. If we want to decrypt the message that the Holy Spirit's trying to give us, we need to wrap His law around our hands. When we start studying the Word, the battle message is revealed to us. Folks, He's given us orders in real time. We just have to read. And when we're given the eyes to see, that's what that shin on the side of the box is. He starts showing us in our eyes and in our temple, what are the orders? Hey, we need to move, folks. And when you start seeing it this way, it starts to make sense too why the Israelis were always such superior fighters, because they were always thinking and walking in the Spirit and depending on Yahweh. It's only when they departed from Yahweh and began to mix and try to be on their own power, the Geborim, they thought that they were able, the men of renown, right? They went on their own prowess. Those were the ones that fell. Pride goeth before destruction. So, it's when we get rid of Babylon, get rid of the ways, divorce her, right? She's trying to usurp the vineyard, the Jezebel. And when we get away from that, we're able to have the eyes to see, right? Mm-hmm. And having that bound to our right hand and the frontlets for our eyes, our right hand will be doing the fruit, the good works, the acts of faith with good works. That's faith in action. That's the good fruit. Your works alone will not save you. Your faith alone will not save you. Works, no work and no faith, that's a dead tree standing. You got some faith, okay. Well, you got a lot of leaves. But if there's no fruit, Jesus withered the tree up from the root, right? Matthew 32 or 24, right? And so we got to bear good fruit by exercising our faith and witnessing and sharing the gospel and bringing people back to Jesus. And for He's the shepherd, and so we got to go after those lone sheep everywhere they are, and some of them are in unsavory places. They're surrounded by a bunch of jackals and wolves. We're going to beat them off with the rod.
Like it says in Jude 17 that we can still pull some out of the fire, having compassion for some and yet pulling others out of the fire.
And that's what we're up against right now, it might be the case where a lot of believers are all together and hallelujah, that's great, but there's a lot of them that aren't. And with this COVID stuff and the isolation, that stuff's going to be increasing day by day. So like 1 Peter 5:8-9 reminds us of, Satan's like a prowling lion out there. He can smell whether or not you're a child of his or not, and it's when we're alone that we're most vulnerable. So remember that in this time, if you know a fellow believer, be sure to offer them some encouragement. Share with them the story of the Maccabees, about Hanukkah. Even if it's sharing here, I listen to these live streams. It doesn't even have to be ours. Just anything that inspires you. Share this fruit with people, and because that'll give them some hope. And that's the thing. This is a terrible holiday, yes, but there was rapture for those that were saved, and it was a warning. Prophecies that haven't come true yet. Hey, that's quite a gift. So I just wanted to really get that message out there that, like the Navajo stick, we're being given a way to understand the hidden message within the stories. And that's, I think, a big reason why they left Maccabees out of the Bible.
Which oddly the Catholics did not. So strange. But I do have a Dewey Rames Catholic Bible, so I do have Maccabees and a few other extra books of Apocrypha in my Bible.
Well, I'm very surprised to hear that, because it just seems like it would have been the other way around. Like it would have been the Protestants who would have been incorporating it, because, the Maccabees were basically rebels, But then I heard a lot about how the reason it was left out was because it didn't glorify Rome, And then here you got the Roman Catholics putting it in there. So I just don't know. If anything, it might just be like for historical record. But
Well, the
those who don't
Catholics
have
can
eyes to see, you know.
the Catholics can make any scripture if they're truly if they're truly involved with Catholicism and they love it, they can make anything in the scripture point to Catholicism. I'm talking about my dad specifically. You can talk about the scripture and he can say, well, that proves why Catholicism is correct. So it almost makes me wonder if it's a kind of, how do you say it?
It somehow affirms.
Yeah,
it in
somehow
another way.
like they're gonna put it in the Catholic Bible, but not every other Bible, so that most people will ignore it. And the Catholics don't pay attention to it like they should because they think everything in their Catholic Bible affirms Catholicism. And so it kind of gets ignored on both sides in that way. It gets ignored by Catholics because they're not trying to see it for what it is, because for them it proves Catholicism in so many odd ways, and yet the rest of the church is going to say, well, I believe in 66 books of the Bible and I don't need any more than that. And they're afraid, in fact they're afraid, like I used to be before we read the Gospel of Thomas. I was like, oh, I don't want to read about Jesus marrying Mary, and yet we read it and there was nothing in there about Jesus marrying Mary at all. In fact, I was like, this sounds like a lot of other scripture. Why do people think this? And if anyone doesn't know, we went through this, NPC and I, quite a ways back. We read through the Gospel of Thomas and found out there was nothing to fear. But it's so easy to make people fear anything that's not in their 66 book Bible. And yet the Catholics, having it there, will just say, well, that just proves it's to Catholicism. So anyway, there's some kind of psyop, I think.
Well, and we're to test the fruit against the vine, you know. So if you want to use the 66 canonical books of the King James Version as your vine, then compare every scripture you run across to the vine. And in some cases, like the Gospel of Thomas, you'll find that fruit crosses back and forth across that vine a number of times. In fact, so many, it makes you wonder why it's not in there, just like the book of Maccabees. So, you know, there are a few books that are like that. And I've heard a lot of folks that study these apocryphal texts even make comments that usually after the first book, they usually aren't fans of the subsequent volumes, but usually the first one, you'll hear a lot of good, like the book of Adam and Eve, for instance. I've heard a lot of good talk about that, but then it's like, well, you know, you start testing it in the second book and it doesn't add up as well. So, you know, you got to be discerning, right?
Yep.
And that's what makes the King James Version so much the authority. Is before that, you had all these different versions of whatever, you know, and it was when they convened and compared all the scriptures and basically came up with what we know of as the Bible today, is really just the average of all the texts. You know, it's not all of them. So yeah, I would encourage folks to study some of these books because, you know, it really opens up things. The book of Maccabees alone is groundbreaking. In fact, it surprises me too that it's in the Catholic Bible, and yet they don't practice Hanukkah. So you'd think if they had it in there, it would pretty much would make sense to just do Hanukkah. So I think that really what we see here is the Hellenization effect, and that's where Christmas has kind of taken root in the church. And, you know, it's even filtered down into the Protestant churches. You know, you can find a Christmas tree in almost every Protestant church.
Every church.
But how many of them have a menorah? You know, and that seems to be the thing. If you're going to have any kind of a idolish type thing in church, have a menorah, which isn't an idol, but you know, the thing is, it's a departure, you know, and that's why when this epiphany is upon us, you know, it's when manifestation occurs, it's going to have a lot of folks in confusion. You know, they're going to say, well, I've been going, and this is where the gnashing of teeth and stuff. Well, I was going to church every Sunday. Well, Sunday's not even the Sabbath, my friend. And
So if you can't even keep and that's just how things started for me, just by keeping Saturday. I blindly walked into, I'm like, look, I don't know anything, Yahweh. I'm just going to start keeping the Sabbath. And, that was hard for me to do. I mean, I have a ton of work to do. I should be doing paperwork right now. But I started keeping the Sabbath. And I feel like God protected me. I haven't had any negative consequences. I just keep it. And it grew into understanding the feast days. And then it's like, wow. And then before you know it, people just think you're Jewish, but only because you observe different holidays. And then it's like, wow, now you're a peculiar people because your right hand, your actions, you're not like the rest of the world. And so that's, God has to be able to tell you apart from the others, right? The sheep and the goats, as it were. So we have to be sure that we're doing what God would really find pleasing. And so I think, this is why when we afflict ourselves and say, well, that tree, am I really just doing it for the kids? Well, what are we doing for the children if we confuse them, by adding to the mound of lies? I mean, the world's going to lie to them enough as it is.
Right.
The best thing you can do as a parent is give them the truth.
Don't lie to your kids.
Because this might make them question a lot of other things you say.
That's right.
How can you expect them to listen to anything you say if you're lying to them about holidays?
And then you think it's funny and cute to lie to them, and that's just tradition, and that's just what you do, and then teach them to lie to their kids.
Yeah, it's a cycle. And this is exactly how generational possession works, because then it becomes tradition to do this thing, and it gives that spirit room to move around inside that family.
The Christmas spirit.
Yeah. And I just must say that when you consider when people copulate and have children and things like that, and how that oftentimes will revolve around holidays and whatnot, it really makes you wonder what's really going on. And when one chooses to break that cycle, you're kind of ostracized or alienated from your family. And I think this is a lot of what Christ is talking about when he says, think not that I come to send peace on this earth, but a sword. There will be division in homes, and whether it's just something over like, oh, well, I'm not going to keep Sunday, I'm going to keep Saturday, or I'm not going to do Christmas. Either I'm not going to do it at all, which is how people start, or not. Okay, hey, Hanukkah, well, that's pretty cool. Whoa, that story is prophetic.
Right.
So there's like grades and gradients to all this stuff, but that's the whole point of the fruit has to mature. People probably been keeping Hanukkah for years and maybe don't even have a clue what it's about. And so keeping a feast isn't all that helpful either if you don't actually hunger for the wisdom and the fruit that comes from it, because that's the whole point of it. And then if we have those seeds, we're left, after we eat that fruit, we're left with the seeds, and we can sow those seeds. What did you learn about that holiday? Debrief, testify, my friend. And here's when the Spirit moved in my life and showed me all these things and opened my eyes.
Well, Zen Garcia said moving away from the holidays to the holy days. And I was like, oh man, something as simple as that didn't even occur to me. Holiday. Yeah, move away from the holidays to the holy days.
And a lot of it is wordplay. I mean, we're under spells. We're under tradition. These principalities, they get the worship in very indirect ways. And, they're successful if they just get us to not worship Yahweh. They're already winning. But they want the worship themselves too. So, the movie stars and all of them, they garner our worship also, if we pay attention to them. So, we're really in a spiritual war indeed, because, where we can otherwise direct these energies back into ourself and commune with God and with the body of Christ to bear those fruits. Instead, we can get polluted and get some strange fruit, right? And that comes from our communion with Babylon
and these other species of trees, right? So these parables really help to color things in such a way that we can really start to understand. Because if a tree doesn't bear good fruit, it's it's hewn down, right?
Right.
So anyway, that tangent's finished, but I wanted to refocus and make sure I didn't forget anything about the Navajo branch. But that sent me into a thing that we're really spiritual warriors, yeah? And so we got to learn how to read the battle language, so we don't get caught in the crossfire, as it were. Because Yahweh creates and Yahweh destroys. And, you got to get out of the way. And so I think his word gives us that warning. And let me see here. Just making sure I don't see. I do have some other notes on here, but these are for Gary's show next week.
Oh, yes. Yep. Gary Wayne on Friday. I think Friday is the 18th.
Well, I have a lot of notes here about
Yes,
Orion.
Friday the 18th.
So I'll save that for him. But here's the thing, folks. We have authority over these other spirits already. They don't want you to know. That's the biggest weapon they have against you, it's to cloud your mind from the very nature of reality, which is of its spirit. We have to start thinking on a spiritual level, and that's beyond our five senses. So just anytime that something extrasensory occurs, test that spirit, see what's going on there. If something edifies your faith, share it, and that's testifying in the spirit. Get people to think outside what they can see, touch, taste, hear. That's the whole point of it. That the world that's coming is going to be turning all that off. They don't want people walking around like that. And so, you got to meet some people where they're at, and this is where I understand the New Age movement's whack. I get that. But we got to learn to identify strengths in people. If somebody seems to have a spiritual bone in their body, craft you a fishing lure, and become a fisher of men and women, and be like, all right, this piece of scripture right here might be effective to plant a seed. You're not going to save a lot of people on the spot, but you got to have ways to reach them, and you can't give up on people, because the lost lambs are out there scattered, and we got to gather as many of them, their fruit, before the Lord comes back to inspect his vineyard, because he's going to be cutting down a lot of trees. And I say this again, just being outside and burning brush, and I've had to deal with so much wood, you wouldn't even believe how much wood I've had to burn. And so it was like preparing for Hanukkah and talking about all this stuff. I've been in this attitude for a while of the harvest and the fruit and the lulav, the branches, like all this stuff is just so relevant now after having dealt with so many different species of trees and so on and so forth. So I just really feel like the Spirit's been moving with me a lot, just in walking everyday life, how it manifests and teaches you things about the just something as fundamental as the fruit, and being a gardener and thinking about things in this different context. I don't know how else to explain it. It just feels like blinders got lifted off my eyes more so than they had. I don't know how to explain it. It's like a veil was some type of veil
talks
lifted
about,
on me recently.
Wasn't it Romans where he says you see through a glass darkly and now things are clearing
Yes.
up? And just like the blind man where Jesus touched him 2 different times before he could finally see clearly. We're raising up, you could say lift the veil, you could say I was blind, now I see. I imagined it that I was walking amongst most people and it was cloudy, like a fog, a heavy, dense fog. And I would come up above that fog and I would see out further to the bigger picture. And I wasn't even up that high yet, just above the people, just above the fog.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see so much clearly. And the more we grow in our spiritual maturity, the less fog, the more clear things are, and the higher I don't like to say ascend because I'm not into Hermetic alchemy, but have you noticed that all of that stuff that they take is a hijacking of the true ascension
Yeah.
of our true ascension to the light. You mentioned the light body. You know, they want to ascend into a light body on Earth that requires mRNA and genetic modification and programmable matter. They want to be able to have superpowers and light bodies on Earth where they're floating around. If you don't know what I'm talking about, watch my video, Black Gold Ascension. I talk about that. But the true ascension is when we get those light bodies that were promised to us, which would make sense why Jesus showed up with a light body, because that is the body he resurrected into when he
Yeah.
showed back up, and that we will also have. We will be just like him in that kind of body, not with the powers that he has, not like God's, but like his body, the way he returned. We will have new bodies. There'll be those light bodies that they're trying so hard to create here on Earth now.
Well, and he was the first fruits in that stage too. So remember the correlation with fruit and his light body. You know, we'll share in a lot of different gifts. You know, like the angels. You got to remember, we are replacing angels that were serving in the tabernacle. So like, we're all going to have different duties and different abilities, most likely. You know, we'll all be part of the body of Christ, and we'll be replacing some of these angels. So we're going to see people there that we've read about. They're going to be in the temple services as well. You know, that's the thing. Like, we're really, you just practice for heaven, which is, and I was learning about that too. The rooms for the priests were built onto the temple, and that was the porch. And they used cedars from Lebanon, you know, to put up the porch. And that's where the priests lived. And so they, you know, we're going to live right on site, you know, right on the temple grounds. And it's like the further we've been from that, the further we are from God, right? So he can't be around sin though, right? So I don't know. Sorry, I got off topic again. It just makes me excited because, you know, we have a job. We'll have
Right.
jobs.
We will. We'll have roles. And
Yeah.
again, you could be saved, right? Like you might be saved now, but you could have a better role in heaven. You could have a way more awesome role, depending on the works you're willing to do now.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like in school. I mean, you can just pass or you can try to get accolades.
Right.
So yeah, and it talks about the raiments and things like that too. So, you know, there, you know, not that you should care, you know, necessarily, because I mean, it's just enough to be saved, period. You know, and we got a lesson to learn from a lot of these martyrs. I mean, some of these folks went through a lot of agony, you know, for the hope of being saved. But chances are that's might have been the one thing that did it for them. You know, if they died before Christ did, you know, being a martyr for their faith, because Christ says that no greater act of love, what for than dying for laying down your life for a friend. You know, that's a virtuous fruit, as it were. So, anyways, I didn't want to get off topic. What I did want to do is read about this guy, because this is the guy that had the you know, moxie. The father of Judas Maccabeus, Eleazar Avaran, Simon Thassi, John Gaddy, and Jonathan Aphus. Matthias was from a rural priestly family from Modian. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. It's an Israeli city located in central Israel. Like all fit priests, he served in the temple in Jerusalem. He was the son of Johanan, a grandson of Simeon the Hasmonean, and the great-grandson of Asmon and Hasmoneus. Cohen of the lineage of Joarib, for being the fifth grandson of Idaiah, son of
This is not easy for you
Jarib.
today. They're giving you too many names.
Well, I like to read the
Yep,
names
practice
because they
makes
shouldn't be
perfect.
ignored. There's a reason they're mentioned. And grandson of Jachin, in turn a descendant of Phineas, the high priest of Israel, according to Matthias's own words in First Maccabees. After the Seleucid persecutions began, which I think is what we're seeing right now, with the buy-sell trade, mask mandates, vaccines, I think we're just seeing the beginning of what our own Seleucid persecution. Matthias returned to Modi in 167 BCE when asked by a Seleucid Greek government representative under Emperor Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, to offer sacrifice to the Greek gods. He not only refused to do so, but slew him with his own hand, the Jew who had stepped forward to do so. He then killed the government official that required the act. So, I understand that we're not supposed to be violent and all that, but this is what this man did, and he was given refuge in the wilderness. And we see the same thing with Elijah. He done the same thing and fled into the wilderness and petitioned Yahweh for sanctuary. So we see a trend here. Let everyone who, and Elijah ended up going, he didn't ever even died. He was just taken away. I mean, so anyway, let everyone who has zeal for the law and who stands by the covenant follow me, his famous words. Matthias, after assassinating the Greek government official who was forcing him to sacrifice. The Septuagint, 1 Maccabees 2:27. That's a little bit of Assassin's Creed kind of action going on there, isn't it?
Right.
Upon the edict for his arrest, just like Jezebel did for Elijah, he took refuge in the wilderness of Judea. We read about the mountains region of Judea with his 5 sons, and called upon all Jews to follow him, just like Isaiah 11:11. Many eventually responded to his call. Matthias then disappears from historical record. He probably died in 166 BCE. Now, when I've read about this historical context, his son Judah Maccabeus takes over for him, and within a year or two after his father's death, he recaptures Jerusalem. Even with a blow to their morale, with his father dying, Judas Maccabeus exhibits great faith against horrible odds. I mean, they were not favored to win this, folks. And he had great faith, just like David. And they retook the temple. So this was the first step in the Maccabean revolt, the result of which was Jewish independence. See, they won in the end, which had not been enjoyed for more than 400 years. The events of the War of the Maccabees form the basis of the holiday of Hanukkah, which is celebrated by Jews on the 25th of Kislev. That's today, essentially. Kislev is the 3rd month in the civil year.
Oh no!
And the 9th.
Look at that weird picture.
It is kind of strange.
It's really odd.
And that's what I was meaning to say before, is I learned a distinction. There's a civil calendar and an ecclesiastical calendar, because I was getting really confused when I was getting into the feast days, and I was like, what is going on here? There's like the New Year's in September, but it's really not, and I was getting confused. Well, here's kind of a brief explanation. Kislev is the 3rd month of the civil year, which means that the civil year begins in September. And so this is the 3rd month, and the 9th month of the ecclesiastical year on the Hebrew calendar, meaning that the 12th would land in Pisces, March. And then that's why we have Nisan in April as the 1st. So the ecclesiastical year is more or less the agricultural calendar, whereas the civil calendar is almost like your Hellenized calendar, if you will, in my opinion. But it kind of dictates, it changes more. It's still got the Hebrew year, obviously. But it's kind of a different way to keep time. Okay, so because this day and age, who's really farming? I mean, yeah, we grow food still, but it's not the same way as it was. And this is, again, where the native culture kind of pays homage, because this is where I think Yahweh would would like that. He's like, hey, these guys are actually out there growing their own food and stuff. I can talk to them. They're not all polluted and distracted, even if they're not doing his other laws. Okay, and that might have been all I was wanting to read from this particular one. Let me get that tab off there. And I wanted to read about the hero here, Judas Maccabeus. Do you know what this man's nickname was?
I couldn't possibly guess.
He was known as the Hammer of God.
Oh boy, that's a lot. That's interesting.
Yeah, and there's good reason for that too. He was quite the commander. So Judah Maccabee, or Judas Maccabeus. Oh yeah, I totally forgot, guys. I'm so sorry. I need to be sharing these links. Okay. Judas Maccabeus, the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah, which means dedication. Mind you, that they did not actually dedicate the temple until they were able to retake it. And this was, I think, 2 years after the abomination of desolation had occurred. So bear in mind that if this vaccine is the abomination of desolation, and they begin this, around this time, and will it end maybe a couple years from now? You see, like, I don't know, kind of. So when you read in Revelations, and you're reading about the tribulation, try to remember the context we're working with is very likely to be what they were dealing with in Hanukkah. Okay, anyway, the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah commemorates the restoration of the Jewish worship at the Second Temple. So why wouldn't it also be similar to the third, right? In Jerusalem in 164 BCE, after Judah Maccabeus. That's a fun thing to say, folks. I encourage you to say it.
Judas Maccabeus.
Hammer of
Hammer
God.
of God.
Well,
Judas Maccabeus rolls off the tongue too.
Removed all of the statues depicting Greek gods and goddesses and purified it. So, he was doing basically what Jesus did in the temple when he flipped over the table and ran them all out of there too. He's exhibiting a righteous indignation. Judah was the third son of Matthias the Hasmonean, the third son, folks. He wasn't the firstborn. A Jewish priest from the village of Modi'in. In 167 BCE, Matthias, together with his sons Judah, Eleazar, Simon, John, and Jonathan, started a revolt against the Seleucid ruler Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who since 175 BCE had issued decrees that forbade Jewish religious practices. After Matthias' death in 166 BCE, Judah assumed the leadership of the revolt in accordance with the deathbed disposition of his father. Kind of reminds me of Isaac in Genesis 49. The first book of Maccabees praises Judah's valor and military talent, suggesting that those qualities made Judah a natural choice for the new commander. Speaking of which, if you do go back to Genesis 49, I'm pretty sure that's where it's at. Isaac talks about Judah being a lion and says that he'll always be the leader or something like that. Well, it's kind of interesting that later on we see this story right here about Judah being the hammer. So he's the lion in a sense. Oh, origin of the hammer. Sorry, I got excited. In the early days of the rebellion, Judah received a surname Maccabee. Several explanations have been put forward for this surname. One suggestion is that the name derives from Aramaic Makkaba, Merkabet, and modern Hebrew hammer or sledgehammer. In recognition of his ferocity in battle, others believe it is reference to his weapon of choice. Ooh, man!
So he was who's the Roman god or whatever with the hammer? Is that Thor?
That's the Norse. If
Oh.
you want Roman, you're going to go
Oh.
with Vulcan or
Okay.
Hephaestus, his Greek counterpart,
Just
and he was
thinking,
a weapons maker.
just thinking another hijacking. I mean, I'm not saying like Maccabees is older than those demigods and stuff, but I just find it interesting that they would. It's a possible pre-hijacking. But anyway, I'm just thinking out loud. Go on.
Well, I mean, yeah, there are definitely some parallels. And you know, your hammer is traditionally your priestly type weapon when you play an RPG or something like that, and you're a cleric or a priest class. You almost always have a mace or a blunt weapon. They or a lot of times will not use bladed weapons. So that's kind of interesting that he might have used a hammer as opposed to any other implement. Anyway, another word you could use is a maul. So the Lion of Judah mauled people, probably, right?
Okay. Like Maul, but is it spelled the same or?
Yeah,
It
it's a
doesn't-
sledgehammer. Use
Okay.
it for splitting wood, actually.
Jeez.
Another
Okay.
funny
Definitely
thing
have
to
used
mention.
that myself.
It is also possible that the name Maccabee is an acronym for the Torah verse, My Kamaka Baliim Adonai, who among the gods is like you, O Adonai. His battle cry to motivate troops. Oh, wow. Rabbi Moshe Skriber writes that it is an acronym for his father's name, Matayahu Cohen ben Yakahanan. Some scholars maintain that the name is a shortened form of the Hebrew Makabayahu, from Nakab to mark or designate, meaning the one designated by Yahweh. Again, folks, Isaiah 11, he raises up an ensign, somebody to gather his people, gather the remnant, just exactly like Judah Maccabee. Again, this is the first time I'm learning a lot of this stuff, so
Right.
this is so
Same here. You're
wild.
teaching us, or at least me.
So this is definitely in line with Isaiah. And this is what Yahweh does. You know, he'll raise up people just to prove he is the most powerful spirit. You know, he is our Elohim. Early victories. Mindful of the superiority of the Seleucid forces during the first 2 years of the revolt, just like the United States or the New World Order, Judah's strategy was to avoid any engagement with their regular army. Sounds pretty smart. And to resort to guerrilla warfare. Harambe, emphasis. In order to...
I haven't heard about
He'll live
Harambe in a
forever
long
in our
time.
hearts. In order to give them a feeling of insecurity. This is also how the natives fought. Okay, another thing to note there. The Navajo and such. The strategy enabled Judah to win a string of victories. At the Battle of Nahal el Haramaya, Wadi Haramaya, he defeated a small Seleucid force under the command of Apollonius. Ooh, that's an interesting name to pop up. We see that in Revelation 9 also. Governor of Samaria, who was killed. Judah took possession of Apollonius' sword. So he traded his hammer for a sword and used it until his death as a symbol of vengeance. Oh, he drew the guy's own troops' blood with his own sword. That is spiteful. And Nahal el Hamarai recruits flocked to the Jewish cause. He won his own soldiers against him. Now that right there is, he had leadership +5. If you can win the enemy's troops to your side, that's
Yeah.
he had a high charisma stat
Absolutely.
and high leadership. He rolled pretty high on those attributes. Shortly thereafter, Judah routed a large Seleucid army under the command of Saron near Beth Horon, largely thanks to a good choice of battlefield. Then in the Battle of Emmaus, Judah proceeded to defeat the Seleucid forces led by generals Nicanor and Georgius. Their force was dispatched by Lysias, whom Antiochus left as viceroy after departing on a campaign against the Parthians. By a forced night march, Judah succeeded in eluding Gorgias, who had intended to attack and destroy the Jewish forces in their camp with his cavalry. While Gorgias was searching for him in the mountains, Judah made a surprise attack upon the Seleucid camp and defeated the Seleucids at the Battle of Emmaus. The Seleucid commander had no alternative but to withdraw to the coast. The defeat of Emmaus convinced Lysias that he must prepare for a serious and prolonged war. He accordingly assembled a new and larger army and marched with it on Judea from the south via Idumea, which there's prophecies against Idumea in the Bible, by the way. The fat of rams, etc. His sword will be, it'll drink much from those in this area. After several years of conflict, Judah drove out his foes from Jerusalem, except for the garrison in the citadel of Acra. Acra is both the name of the fortified structure and also one of the 3 suburbs in Jerusalem during the late Second Temple period, from which it takes its name. This suburb, also known as the Lower City, corresponds today with Silwan and the city of David. He purified the defiled temple of Jerusalem on the 25th of Kislev, December 14th, 164. Folks, that's pretty much what we're talking about. Restored the service in the temple. The reconsecration of the temple became a permanent Jewish holiday.
I sneezed.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Ruach ya.
Oh, I want to say that to people when they sneeze now. Ruach
Hanukkah, which continued even after the temple was destroyed in 70 CE, Hanukkah is still celebrated annually. The liberation of Jerusalem was the first step on the road to ultimate independence. So yeah, I mean, this is a feast day that was kind of lost. That's why it's kind of called the mystery of Hanukkah, because there was no temple anymore. So, this was just kind of forgotten about, right? So there's a lot of wisdom in this. And can anybody that's hearing, is everybody here? Yeah, I haven't been reading the chat. Is this the first time folks are hearing this? If you could just comment in the chat about your own personal experience of whether or not you've heard these stories before. That would be interesting to know. After Jerusalem, upon hearing the news of the Jewish communities in Gilead, Transjordan, and Galilee were under attack by neighboring Greek cities, Judah immediately went to their aid. Judah sent his brother Simeon to Galilee at the head of 3,000 men. Simeon proceeded to successfully fulfill his task, achieving numerous victories and transplanted a substantial portion of the Jewish settlements, including women and children, to Judea. Judah personally led the campaign in Transjordan, taking with him his brother Jonathan. After fierce fighting, he defeated the Transjordan tribes and rescued the Jews concentrated in fortified towns in Gilead. The Jewish population of the areas taken by the Maccabees was evacuated to Judea. Did I share this one, by the way? I don't remember if I did.
I don't think so. But you've got a yes from me that this is the first time, and a yes from Pia that is first time. The numbers, we were up at 21 people a while back, but it's dropped down to 9 or 10, so maybe people didn't. There might be quite a few that didn't hear your question or left or whatever.
A little bit impassioned, so my apologies.
I'm enjoying it.
Okay, so let me get to where. After the conclusion of the fighting in Transjordan, Judah turned against the Edomites in the south, captured and destroyed Hebron and Maresha. He then marched on the coast of the Mediterranean, destroyed the altars and statues of the pagan gods and Ashdod, just like Elijah did with Baal, and returned to Judea with much spoils. Judah then laid siege to the Seleucid garrison at the Acra, the Seleucid citadel of Jerusalem. The besieged, who included not only Syrian Greek troops but also Hellenistic Jews, appealed for the help of Lysias, who effectively became the regent of the young king Antiochus V Eupator, because I think he was really young. He was like 9 or something. So regent means he ruled until he was old enough. And until the death of Antiochus Epiphanes at the end of 164 BCE. During the Parthian campaign,
Lysias, together with Euphrater, set out for a new campaign in Judea. I guess he was a little older than I thought. Lysias skirted Judea as he had done in his first campaign, entering it from the south, and besieged Beth-zur. Judah raised the siege of Acre and went to meet Lysias in the battle of Beth-Zachariah, south of Bethlehem. The Seleucids achieved their first major victory over Maccabees, and Judah was forced to withdraw to Jerusalem. Beth-zur, he didn't even lose a battle up until then. Beth-zur was compelled to surrender, and Lysias reached Jerusalem, laying siege to the city. The defenders found themselves in a precarious situation because their provisions were exhausted, it being a sabbatical year. Now remember, when Antiochus Epiphanes attacked, he did so on the Sabbath. And not only was this a Sabbath, but it was a sabbatical year. So they're even giving rest to the land. So they really did exhaust. He hit them when they were weakest, Anyway, let me continue here. It being a sabbatical year during which the fields were left uncultivated, however, just as capitulation seemed imminent, Lysias and Euphrater had to withdraw when Antiochus Epiphanes, commander-in-chief Philip, whom the late ruler appointed regent before his death, rebelled against Lysias and went about to enter Antioch and seize power. Lysias decided to propose a peaceful settlement, which was concluded at the end of 163 BCE. As you can see, things are starting to fray for them. The terms of the peace were based on the restoration of religious freedom, the permission for the Jews to live in accordance with their own laws as a peculiar people, and the official return of the temple to the Jews. Lysias defeated Philip, only to be overthrown by Demetrius, see they're eating their own, son of the late Seleucus IV Philopater, returned from years as a hostage in Rome. Demetrius appointed Alcimus Jachem, a Hellenist Jew, as high priest, a choice the Hasidim might have accepted since he was of priestly descent. So I don't have to keep reading, but you guys get the point. This is a remarkable story, and this is the first time
one that most people haven't heard. You're right. Most people. Yeah. I would bet most, even Catholics, wouldn't really know this, because I remember my parents were quoting out of Maccabees, and it was something about a widow. I don't even remember what it was, but it wasn't any of this stuff at all.
And there's several chapters. There's a lot to read.
Yeah, it's a lot. I was just looking. It's in my book. Page 1026 starts First Maccabees, and through Second Maccabees ends at page 1086. So it's 60 pages in my Douay-Rheims of, and Douay-Rheims is very much like the King James. It's going to have the thous and the thys and the same, very similar language, but it's got some Catholic commentary that's funny sometimes, like. You can tell it's Catholic when you read the commentary. But yeah, it's 60 pages, not that long. I read 600-page books, so totally worth reading it all the way through, first and second. Now, would you say that most of this that you're teaching us in Hanukkah is in First Maccabees or Second Maccabees, or both?
It seems to be concentrated within the first 6 chapters of
first 6
Maccabees.
Chapters, okay.
And here now obviously, I haven't even gotten through it, but I'm sure there's a lot more to talk about. And what I'm reading here from these is really kind of discussing that, the battles and stuff that were taking place. And when I kind of glossed over things last time because I was just trying to preface things a little bit, so I jumped around a lot and went straight to the next chapter to talk about the war, because I was trying to emphasize that there was an actual battle that took place, that this wasn't just some holiday. Like, this could mirror what we're going to go through is what I was trying to explain. So anyway,
the Battle of the Beast.
The War of the Saints, yeah. Okay, let's see here. There was something I was wanting to mention. Oh, yeah. Okay. The Maccabees destroyed the Greek altars and the villages, circumcised boys, and forced Hellenized Jews into outlawry. Judah's nickname, Maccabeus, now used in popular culture to describe Jewish partisans as a whole, is taken from the Hebrew word for ham. Okay, so as you can see, they came in and started doing the law, as opposed to they were being killed for being circumcised. They were aborting children, killing women that were pregnant. This is why it says, "Woe unto those who are with child in the day of the coming of the Lord." And so, this could mirror, again, what we're going through now. And so whether you take that as physical, which it was physically material manifest here with women and children, but it could also mean, have you just been reborn spiritually? Has your fruit had time to mature before your faith is tested? Are you going to have enough scriptural basis to resist these things, to even see what's going on at all, first of all, but then to have the temerity and the virtues installed within you from what you've learned from the Word of God, and these stories. These really help us embody those same virtues that Yahweh wants to see in His people. He wants us to be courageous and strong, like it says in 1 Joshua chapter 1:9. Verse 9, rather, is have I not commanded you to be strong and courageous, for your Lord God Jehovah is with you wherever you go. And that's Jehovah is salvation. So we're to be reminded that He's with us no matter where we go. We just always got to be willing to listen to Him. And I would be interested also to look at that one battle they lost there when we were reading a moment ago. Just like it was in Joshua, there was a time when he didn't consult Yahweh, like with the Gibeonites,
right,
and was punished. So I'd be interested to know, if you researched that particular battle, if maybe Judah, maybe he got a little overconfident after all those strings of victories. Maybe Yahweh let him lose one just so he didn't get a big head.
Right, try to take some credit on his own, or since it's the first I've heard, I would know, but could be.
So I would just like to point something out like that. It could be a deeper study on that particular battle, could be noteworthy. But anyway, this is another link that might be of interest. I'm going to drop that for folks. And here's all your battles. It looks like, I think, was it this one he lost?
And actually, Maccabees in my Dewey Rames is the end of the Old Testament. It's the last two books.
Huh. Interesting.
Because I was noticing the timeline being 160 BCE, they're close to Christ's birth.
Right before Christ.
And also, looking at it in my Bible, it's the very last two books before the New Testament. So really, that's it until the New Testament in the Dewey Rames Catholic version of the Bible.
So that's really interesting to know. So this happened before Christ.
Just before.
Yeah, but the point is, it still happened before.
Right.
And
yes, it
so
did.
This is important to note, is because that means when Jesus was making his reference, he was referencing something that had only occurred
recently,
like a couple hundred years before, but yet referencing it for a future generation.
Right.
The one of the fig tree. And that's where Daniel's 70 weeks, and we see Israel's now a nation again. So yeah, I think that's really important to note. But anyway, this is a lot of fun. This has been one of the most enjoyable. I mean, I enjoy learning about all the feast days, but I treated this with I was so dismissive of it at first. And
even just only a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I know. And it really I feel it's just fun. I think God has a good sense of humor. Even when you think you got an understanding of something, sometimes it's like, nope, there's another nugget for you. So it's a lot of fun to learn about these things. And this is, a good example of when his people were provided salvation in a different kind of way. They were pursued out into the desert by the forces of Pharaoh, and tested in that way, and he brought them out of captivity. So there's a trend of being brought out of captivity over and over and over again. And so, well, what is the main attribute he's looking for? He's wanting obedience.
That's
Do
right.
you read my word?
Yep.
Do you keep my laws? Do you mix with the people of the world, Babylon? He's calling everybody out, but only few are going to answer the call. And those who answer, you got to go back and get some more sheep, and put on your armor. You're getting ready to go back, And so it's really helped put some things in the context for me. And we see with historical figures such as this gentleman, the Judah Maccabee, he was such the leader that he could even win enemy troops. And then we see that also that Yahweh has fame, right? And this is a lot of times like the story with Joshua and Rahab. She had heard about the battle victories of the Jews and all the wild things that were going on. I mean, they had just taken Jericho by doing nothing but marching around it and blowing a horn.
Yeah.
And and they're like, well, we're getting ready to deal with this crowd. What's going on? They must have their gods definitely stronger than ours. I don't know who this gang is, but I want to be on their side. That's why she helped the spies. She had heard about Yahweh. And so that's another reason why we got to keep the feast days. It's to remind people of the miracles that have already been performed, by his intercession. And because it's not to save us, it's to glorify himself. And so this is really where the concept of glory comes from. So when we offer ourselves for his use, it's to add to that glory, to testify how, these things manifest in our own life. You never know. You might find yourself in a situation where you're a hammer of sorts yourself, leading people and doing such remarkable things. I mean, these people probably never thought that was going to happen to them either. And the next thing you know, boom.
Well, you look at Gideon, he was like, no, not me. No, not me.
Well, look at
Can't
Jonah.
be me. I'll give another good example. Not going to do it.
So, I just wanted to kind of preface these things. I know I've read a lot tonight, so I'm not going to, I know it's not boring, but I don't want to like wear people out by reading too much. But I did want to share this stuff because it is so remarkable. It should be, this is the kind of stuff we should be learning in school, like,
Right.
Come on, really, but they don't want people having, it's funny to me that in the Satan's kingdom that he's tried so hard to build, it's nothing but a house of cards.
Absolutely.
And the irony, because remember, they didn't have
Iron.
enough gold to make a menorah, so they had to use iron. So I think the irony here is that adherence to Yahweh's laws ends up becoming a rebellious act in the kingdom of Satan and his kingdom. And so his kingdom will be overthrown by rebels, just like he tried to do to Yahweh. Is that not delicious irony? I mean, it's just, I can't, it's too much. So that's another thing that I kind of realized when I was reading these stories, is that by not being Hellenized and Babylonian, we're a peculiar people. We're called out. And that'll be the new kingdom that destroys the former, and it'll grow to fill the entire earth. We'll have authority over all these principalities. I mean, you got to remember, the first temple was built by spirits. Solomon made these demons and angels work for the glory of God. And that was how the first temple even got put there in the first place. Now, the one in this story is actually the second temple. And that's the one that was there when Jesus laid his hand on the bricks, as they were leaving prior to the parable of the fig tree. And he's talking about all these will be destroyed. He already saw the whole city being destroyed. So I think, and that's where you get into the preterism. There's some folks that think that what he said there was fulfilled when Rome destroyed Jerusalem, but that just led them back into captivity. Now we're seeing that the worldwide kingdom, and we're all scattered now, but then Israel's now there once more, so that's the fig tree, right? But does it have just leaves, or does it have fruit, right?
Right.
Man, I tell you, it's so
I was going to ask you, but I don't
delicious.
need to now, about, I don't think I need to now, about Matthew 21, verse 19, where Jesus comes up to the fig tree, and it's only got leaves, it's got no fruit, and he says, "You shall never bear fruit again," and then just withers the fig tree. And I remember wanting to be like, what the heck? Like, why did he do that? But the example was, if it's not bearing fruit, it will never bear fruit, almost like a tear.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly the whole point. And see, a lot of folks that want to badmouth the Bible or point out Jesus is like, man, that's so whack. Why would he kill an innocent tree? Well, the point was, it's not. Its purpose is to bear fruit, and it's not doing what it's supposed to do, which is also the argument against, unfruitful acts. I don't want to offend too many people right now, but I'm just saying that, if an act is unfruitful, then it also gets the same result, right? So if we live our life according to our own pleasure and own laws, and our acts are not in line with the law, right? We don't have a bound to our right hand, then we're off the narrow path and we risk destruction, right?
Right.
We're preserved as the salt of the earth, as that good fruit, if we try to be in line with the law, right? And so the blue hem on the robes of the priests, that's to remind them of that law also. And here's a really cool thing, is that the time period that we're studying right now, it was around this time, around the time of Egypt. Actually, you could go back a lot further perhaps, but they didn't even have a color blue. Like, blue to them didn't exist. They didn't have a word blue. Nor do they have a word for the sky or the water. It just was. And they had descriptive words for it, but they didn't have any word for it. Blue, I get the feeling, based on what I've been reading, I think blue was introduced by Yahweh. And it was something that didn't really exist except in the water and the sky. It's really quite remarkable. And of course, we've learned about how the throne of God is some type of blue-greenish color, the throne of God. Because it's referenced, I've seen some folks reference sapphire, and so they'll cite some parts in the Bible. But then I've seen the others that, like in Revelation 4, where it cites the emerald color. So we could do a Strong's comparison sometime on like the throne, to see where this blue color comes from.
Oh, that'd be a good idea.
Blue or green, either way, it's leaves of the tree.
Because the Illuminati / elite / whatever you want to call it will use like blue and red as opposing, the same like black and white when it comes to the opposing. Like, I can't think, yin and yang type
of thing. Like an MK Ultra deal.
But yeah, but it's like the yin and yang, black and white versus, same as black versus white is the same as red versus blue, and you'll see that a lot, especially in like Marvel or superhero.
It's a war for
Spider-Man,
your temple.
Superman.
2 sides of your brain.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Man.
The duality. That's the word. The duality.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. So, I just think that there's something to be said there as well for the red chord of salvation. So you have your blue chord, which is the note David played for the Lord, a blue chord, an A minor, the blue note. He played a chord that pleased the Lord. The red cord is seen in Joshua. It's the cord of salvation. Well, you got red on one end of the rainbow and blue on the other, and if they're both cords, right? So red would be the grace and the salvation we're given through Jehovah, the covering. We just have to accept. Blue is maybe how we serve God. We seek to please God, seek after His heart, just like David did. So the blue and red together, is that purple majesty. So yeah, again,
There
I
we
think it's a
go.
hijacking of, like you were saying. It's like they'll take these true principles and try to do something to it, to use it for their own perversions. I mean, a lot of folks that are into that, they are using symbols that you might think are familiar, but they just take them in and invert them or make them incomplete or something. I mean, they recognize there's power in these things, and they don't have them of their own. They have to pervert existing symbols that are infused
That's
with some
right.
type of authority.
It's just
So I mean, that's
hijacking
something.
because Satan is not creative.
Exactly. The left can't meme, man. And
Right.
that's his kingdom is nothing but a bunch of leftists. I mean, it's sad. When the Antichrist Epiphanies character does manifest and come on the scene, oh, did you ever watch the American Horror Story Apocalypse?
I don't think I watched that one. It depends
It's
on which
I
season
don't
it
like
was.
any of the others, but honestly, that one was very violent and crazy. But
What season was it?
anyway, I'm not real certain, but
It
it's the one
probably
where
not.
she's holding like a little infant baby
Ooh,
in
no.
the graphic. But
Nope.
anyway, that one, when he inherits the kingdom, right? They have this character that ends up finding himself in the position where he starts off with some Satanist church, right? Low level ranking folks, like I suspect these Monolith dudes might have been a part of. You got that gang. Well, then they're like, well, why don't we introduce him to the cooperative? And then basically he meets the Illuminati, right? And well, when he gets involved with these people, he's like, this is who I have as my army. It's a bunch of idiot,
Nazi
leftists,
punchers.
essentially is what it was, and he was just like, I can't do anything with these people, and that's the thing. Like, he's going to inherit a kingdom of sissified, incapable,
Right. Which
inept.
is why he's building up his AI army, I think.
Yeah.
His golems. And we have to talk. I know it's getting really late, but we do have to talk about the monoliths. You were going to talk about that.
Well, yeah, okay. So,
I mean, maybe you weren't done with your thought and you want to finish, but
no, dude, it's cool. So, well, first I want to mention that I think it's relating to the conjunction, okay, first and foremost, because the thing we're going to talk about is a departure from what I think is really going on. And so, as you can see, the distance is being closed pretty rapidly. We're at about right here, meow. So we're getting to about a degree of separation here between Saturn and Jupiter. And again, if you go back to a mythological kind of analysis of this would be father and son. And so Zeus overthrew Saturn, who was a Titan. So the two here ruling conjointly, as it were, is also kind of interesting because he bears a scythe. So there's a reaping harvest element here. There's just a lot of things here that could relate to things. I'm just trying to give some occult flavors to this so that you can kind of recognize it when you see it. So I think there's significance to these two things combining because it's supposed to be like father and son joining, or giant Titan and his son, who's not a Titan, who's actually notorious along with Apollo for killing the giants because they overthrew them, in their past. So this is a very strange type of story, at the very least, and it's supposed to mark, I think, 800-year occasion, and some people are trying to say that this might even be the birth star for Christ, although it doesn't match up chronologically. It might have been a few cycles ago, So, well, I guess in that case, it would be like, let me see, 8, 16,
So about 3 cycles ago, perhaps, if you're going to keep like with the 2000 some year timeline. So what it does not seem to match up perfectly, I don't think, but not an expert, and I haven't taken a deep dive into this yet, but I think the monoliths themselves are likely tied to it, because in the movie 2001 Space Odyssey, it was a black monolith, and there seemed to be some type of astronomical event occurring at the opening scene of the film, and I think that's probably what we're kind of witnessing here too, is that exact same phenomena that's being depicted there. And so the monoliths themselves are either a big tip of the hat to that, just by a bunch of people that are maybe fans of it, but I don't know if that's true or not. But then you find these idiots online who have tried to take credit for it by saying they have done a thing. And so the graphics of...
Well, that's okay. Wait, real quick. I just remembered, what's her name said that Ilhan Omar, when she said some people did something, I wonder if it has anything to do with that.
Some people did a thing.
Yeah.
Right? That's the language she used, right?
Something like that, yeah. So anyway,
Well,
I don't know if it's related, but go on.
No, that didn't jump out to me, so that was cool. She's in hot water again, by the way. The fundraising mechanism she used to get reelected is apparently being under investigation for embezzling a ton of money. Big surprise, right? So this is a map that they displayed at the end of their video. And I'm trying really hard not to give these guys any press
these
because
guys
they're just absolute buffoons.
Just let everyone know these guys took claim to say that they put the monoliths out, but they're like NPC said, buffoons. So probably not, but go ahead.
And I'm telling you, it makes you wonder if it's even legit, because they act so stupid. I mean, it's like watching an episode of I almost said it, but Johnny Knoxville's famous show. It's like watching that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was hard. Yeah. It was cringy. I mean, if I hadn't have been like following this already so intensely, because mind you, there have been so many of these things pop up. I tried to get the pictures loaded for this evening's show, but I didn't get them in time. But I myself have found probably, I think maybe at this point, maybe 10, getting close to 10 or more. And that's just what are known, But here's a map that they showed at the end of their video to say that they were promoting their show called Anti-Something's House. It's just some comedy improv thing on Netflix, but it was supposed to be an A for their show, and this is all just a big promo for their show. And I'm thinking, no, no, it's not, because this is not a very good A, although it's a great Aleph for, the year we're in, Hebrew year, because this is an ox head. So yeah, that's a great ox head, Aleph, which is a plow.
Or it kind of looks like a bird's beak to me.
But what I am trying, the point I want to make is that they only reference a few of the other monoliths. They mention one in Utah here, and then they mention another in Romania, which, as you can see, isn't even on the map that they've shown here. And that it's an A. I don't think so, because that's not an A.
And Jeffrey reminds us that people were not leaving Australia during this, Fauxvid stuff. So how were they able to get in and out of Australia to do something like this?
Well, I'm pretty sure these guys are all part of, a cooperative.
So you think they just had dudes in Australia do it for them?
Well, in fact, they communicated with this fellow here too. So yes, I think they had people do things remotely, or locally for them, remotely rather. And this guy that did a thing, the Netflix guy, he's pretending like he's taking credit for having coordinated this and done it. Yet the map they show on their own video doesn't list any of the other ones that have shown up. There's been at least 2 in California. There's been another one in Pennsylvania. There's been at least one in Vancouver, another one in Manitoba. Hey, it's not an A, right? Because if it's an A, why are these other ones popping up?
Yeah.
right? And yeah, these people were being stupid, but they didn't get noticed that easily because we would have saw it anyway. You see what
Plus,
I
in the
mean? Like,
video,
nothing adds up.
their little monoliths looked really poorly done, and they were trying to like fit it into a small car. Like they were measuring the monolith, then measuring the car, and seeing if they could fit it in there. And I was like, this is a serious joke.
It just seemed like a mockery, you know? Like, it made it seem like, oh, wow, the heat's... the Goyim know. We better, like, have these low-level idiots do some PR spin work for us. And so I think that's really what we were seeing here, is they're just trying to throw us off the trail of something that's actually taking place.
Well, yeah,
That's
the people
really
that
due
are
to
as
this.
dumb as the people in Idiocracy will be like, yeah, okay, that's
Rondo
funny.
makes plants.
Re-
Oh, it's an A
It's got
for the comedy show.
It's got
stupid.
electrolytes.
So yeah, I'm sorry to be so that way, but I'm telling you, I'm saving you the cringe and just giving you the the synthesis after having watched it. They're full of it because this is not an A. It doesn't include the other monoliths. Even if it were an A, it's a very poor A. They could have done some other way, I'm sure. It's just, it doesn't add up. And so there's been monoliths all over the earth that shows some type of coordination among a group. I'm not going to put any names out there, but at the same time, explain it. That many people have the same idea all at the same time.
Oh, hey, 2001 Space Odyssey. Let's all make monoliths and distribute them all over the earth at the same time. All for a comedy show, and then not have them even line up. It just, none of it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to include that because it's a hard video to watch. I don't. And in the YouTube channel they debuted it on had nothing to do with them or anything. And he even made a statement like, I'm not being paid to do this or whatever. And it's just like, what about this makes sense? And then they even comment in the video how they didn't even know each other until like 2 days before it. And none of these guys look dressed to be doing anything. Like none of them probably even owned the proper attire. Like none of them were wearing boots. One guy was in a suit. It's like, come on. Like nobody was even appropriately dressed to be digging holes in the middle of the forest
or desert.
And they paid somebody to manufacture their monolith. It's just like, let's get this gang of idiots together and have them throw
it's
this
like
together.
Larry, Curly, and Moe.
Yeah. So I personally found it offensive to my intellect that they would try and do this. So they should have just owned it for what it was. Like, if anything, it's a comedy troupe trying to ride on the coattails of something else that's going on, and then they're just trying to take credit for it. So again, it's either just a bad joke or let yourself be the judge. I don't think we've seen the last of this, though. We'll probably see more monoliths pop up. I would encourage everybody to keep monitoring this. And why there's been no, and then again, if it is just for this stupid comedy show, which again has nothing to do with 2001 Space Odyssey, has nothing to do with comedy or anything, why are we not seeing placards on these things or QR codes or anything like that? Like, it's such a missed opportunity. To shell out all this money to make monoliths and put them all over the earth for an idiotic comedy show that you're not even promoting with the monoliths? Again, does not make sense.
And then what are they going to say when there's more of them in different places?
And it's already the case.
Right.
So it's like their story already doesn't make any sense. And another thing I wanted to bring up, that while watching this, they make a point of stopping at KFC before they go and do this. And I'm thinking, what are these morons doing? Why is it they have to get KFC on camera? And I just feel like they're signaling to a certain population of people, people that like chicken, that chicken doesn't mean chicken, folks. Chicken's something else. And so, You see what I mean? And that's just like, it screamed at you. And it was just like, is this an advertisement for something else? Like this, it felt like a commercial for something else is what it felt like when you're watching it. It's like, this is produced with a different intention. So I'm sorry to go on and on about it, especially when I'm not like giving you the direct links or anything. But I don't want to give them an ounce of attention.
We watched it for you guys. There's a bunch of morons that pretended that they were putting the monoliths all over, and it's just not likely, and so who cares what else they do or say in that video.
If it seemed somewhat credible, I would have shared it. But like, it was so cringe. Like, I could barely get through it.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what I think is going on with the monoliths. I think it's linked to the conjunction, and I think that's why we've seen an acceleration in their appearance, is because I think they're going to culminate. So the real test for that theory would be to see if they pop up after. So
okay.
We shall see. And so something to study on. Try to find out what was the inspiration for Kubrick. Wasn't it Kubrick?
Yep.
Stanley Kubrick.
That's right. Yep.
And isn't he a little bit of a rebel? Like, he kind of got in trouble.
Well, it turns out he turned out to be.
Times, right?
Yeah, got killed.
Eyes wide shut.
Yeah. Well, he got killed because he didn't want to cut out the parts of that movie that probably explained why people watched it and got confused. Well, that's because they probably cut where they literally sell their daughter and give her away to get their place. And anyway, he didn't want to cut that extra time from the movie, and they said, yeah, we're cutting it, and then he died like 4 days before the movie released.
Well, anyway, I just think that he knew something. And he was always trying to tell people in his stuff. So, hold on. I just wanted to say.
Well, of course. I mean, you could break down all the supposed tells of the fake moon landing from The Shining.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's another thing. He was apparently who they used to do the cinematography. Because he had done it for 2001 Space Odyssey. He was apparently so good at it already.
Right.
So, I mean, I think all this is connected somehow, meow meow. I just don't know how. But if folks want to, like, dissect this a little bit, I think that we're working with something here that could be very important. Another thing, maybe the show we do after Gary's next week, and then we got a show after that, right?
Oh, I'd have to look at a calendar. The 18th...
Well, I'm just trying to, like, it doesn't even matter about the date. I'm just talking about the sequence.
Oh, yeah, the 25th. Oh, we're going to do, if you're willing, Christmas night. It depends on if I'm even available. I'm promising too far ahead, but the next Friday after that would actually be Christmas night. And then the next one would be New Year's Eve, which I guarantee I'd be available for. I can't imagine I'm doing anything for New Year's Eve.
Well, that will be our trivia night anyhow.
Okay.
But the thing is, our Christmas show then would be after the 21st. So it'd be a good time to revisit this and kind of debrief and see what's going on and what's happened if we're even still here. So
we'll still be here.
Well, anyway.
Well, if we weren't, why are the elite like still buying properties on beachfronts and things like that? If they,
well, they don't have ears to hear and eyes to see. I mean, they think their kingdom's going to last here forever. They're wanting to. And see, that's another point I forgot to make earlier, I've made before, is that the usurpation of the vineyard is because, and Gary could expand on this next week, is that they know the laws, right? And they don't think there's a seed out there to compete for heirship. They think they're going to stamp it out. And then if they can do that, Yahweh has no choice but to honor their inheritance. Their role, which won't happen at all. He just burned the whole vineyard.
That's right. It's amazing.
No figs
they think
for
they can
anybody.
Win. No figs tree, no fig.
And that's the
figgy
thing.
Pudding.
How do you get rid of a house that's infested with, or how do you get rid of a bunch of termites in a house? Like at some point it's just like, well, it's got to burn, man. And I think that's the whole point, is that the destruction is it's a necessary part of what
is going to have to take place. It's just whether or not you're here for the destruction or not that's the whole point of the rapture. So whether that's just on mountaintops or what, I don't know how it's going to unfold. I just know that salvation is offered to certain folks, and that the remnant is that, and that there's that stop is put to it, because he's like, all right, I only got so many left. That's it. And that's again to show that he is God. And then we're given a new song of salvation. And so we can touch on that stuff. And so maybe next, or maybe during Christmas also, we can talk about the gifts of the Spirit. Oh, hallelujah. Meow, meow. That's what we should talk about. And which is good, because then right after that, the trivia show, that's Epiphany. And so we can talk about Epiphany and what that means. And that's how Cicada and everything started. And I have to say it. I don't think I ever would have got on this path had I never discovered Cicada. It brought me to where I am now. Like, it helped me learn about Epiphany, and I started keeping the Sabbath and started learning all the Jewish influence, and it's all these things started opening my mind. That's how I discovered the Gospel of Thomas, and these apocryphal texts and stuff. So it's been a ride. So you see that even if you want to, whatever you want to say about QAnon, Q was the source texts that connects back to the Gospels and stuff like that. And so I think for a lot of folks out there, there has been a religious awakening, and it's worldwide, and he has set a fire on earth. People can try to claim credit for it, like these morons are trying to do for the monoliths, but that really gives QAnon a bad name, because really what it is, it's that hunger for truth. That's what it is. It's that shin. Do you have the hunger? Do you have the teeth? You hunger.
QAnon give themselves a bad name by behaving very poorly.
Well, that's the same as saying the Proud Boys represent me, or the whatevers represent me. And I mean, it's just not fair to group everybody together like that. But one thing's for sure, I know people are being led to the gospel over, some exposure. It's better than nothing. I mean, can you imagine this world without it? It'd be a lot more bleak.
I don't know if I feel that way, but that's okay.
Well, my point being is it's not over yet either.
I feel like QAnon are another the cognitive dissonance group that won't see the truth for what it is. They want to believe what they believe, which is some truth, just like Satan in the garden, and ever since, 99 truths to sell one big lie. And so
got a point,
they've got this belief system and confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance that you can't. It's just like, oh my gosh, Bill Cooper said, you'll be able to show them. They'll be their cognitive dissonance is such that you could show them proof and they will not see it. They will not know what's going on until, they'll be walking into the slaughter, and they won't know what's going on until they smell the blood of the man before them. And that is what I think QAnon has become, because they are like rabid dogs, which is, I've said that for many times, because they get angry if you go against what they say. They get angry if you disagree with the plan. They get angry if you suggest it's not all of them. You're right. I mean, I'm not grouping them all, but I'm saying there's very few, unless there's something that kind of made them go, oh, I don't know. Like for me, it was Brave New World way back in the earlier drops, where Q was promising a Brave New World, and you had people like Joe M. who are still out there.
Dude, totally.
Still out there, who are pushing world peace and space travel and things like that. And it's like, okay, so my concern is there's not gospel being taught by Q just because he threw out one scripture several times.
Yeah. And a lot of times not even with the actual verse. It was just like it was the verse, but not, he didn't include like Ephesians a lot of times.
Right. And just say pray. Yeah. Just say keep praying, no to whom. And to see how much of that plan sounded like an Alice Bailey plan, sounded like Hitler's Mein Kampf, all these things, it's just...
And I get what you're saying, but that doesn't mean that is always going to be that way either. I mean, because you got to remember, some of these people probably came from complete darkness,
I'm
and
sure
they're at
they
least
did.
getting a taste of something. And so maybe they're getting seeds on them now that'll sprout. I
Well,
mean,
we can hope
I'm
so.
just trying to say it's, I definitely agree with what he's saying there. There's some bad leaven in there for sure, but I'm just saying, like, for my own story though, I never even followed Q drops as I like, you know what I mean? Like, I never followed it anyway. I just knew how it started, and so we can talk more about the origins, pre catastrophe QAnon, if you will.
Yeah.
Because it did kind of blow up into an embarrassing sycophant thing.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm getting at is that it did teach, it helped me see things that I didn't see before. And
Well, you have a firm foundation. Most of these people, probably 95%, don't. Maybe even 97% or 98% or 99, because they really, if you go against Q, and then I mean, I can't tell you how many people are like, when did you switch sides? I didn't switch sides.
I know, it's like so adversarial.
Yeah, they think you're one or the other because they're still stuck in the Hegelian dialectic.
But you got to realize, some of these people aren't even Christians. They're just like pro-Trump.
The Christians
They
are
like
almost
worship
worse.
Trump.
Christians are almost worse because they think Q and Trump are guided by. Anyway, we don't need to get into it. We're 2.5 hours in. Any last comments you want to make on?
We didn't really talk about this stuff, but let me drop the link real quick. I didn't cover that. Okay, I was supposed to. And I wanted to mention a couple more things real quick.
Ivermectin, yeah.
So
Okay.
I did mention this the last time, but didn't give the story or talk about it too much. They say the vaccine may cause birth defects or miscarriages or infertility, like it attacks the placenta's integrity or whatever, something like that. So whether it just makes you infertile straight up or causes other like mechanical difficulties, either way, what my point being, Epiphanies is upon us. What were they doing to those people? They were killing their unborn children. They were attacking the seed, attacking the very seed. And so I think that's what they're attempting to do here. So I wanted to share this because I see this as a very Epiphany-esque Antichrist activity. And then, of course, the Noahide type laws that might be coming in the future with legal execution stuff like that, because this is, again, what he was doing was issuing these edicts to kill everybody that was keeping the law, keeping the Sabbath. So we're going to see this Sunday Sabbath stuff coming in. Remember, guys, Sunday laws, stay away from that. If the Pope is promoting it, you need to be a little bit skeptical.
If the Pope promotes, just say nope. Get it?
And I'm just saying, like,
if the Pope promotes, just say nope.
I accidentally axed the chat again on accident. Sorry about that.
That's
but anyway, that's pretty much all I wanted to share. And that, but this whole thing is a drama unfolding. This is a stage, and remember, there is a chorus. There is a chorus that's a part of this. Join the chorus. Join the song of salvation. Those singing the song of salvation will be spared. These are those going to be keeping his laws and seeking after his pleasure, bearing the good fruit. So, if I hadn't closed the chat, I would have dropped this in there. But go and just read about what a chorus is and in terms of a theater and kind of how it got its start and stuff. There was always this chorus that was on the stage, and they would sing things, Helps put them things into context, when you really think about it, because the Greeks and such who were writing some of these things, So we'll talk about guitaros and like how the Song of Salvation ties in, and the gifts of the Spirit and stuff like that when we do our Christmas thing.
Okay, keep that in mind for a Christmas special. Even if we end up doing it the 26th instead of the 25th. But, as far as I know, I probably don't have plans on December 25th either in the evening, of
Oh
course.
yeah, it doesn't matter to me.
Right.
But anyway, that's all I had. Thank you all for your time. Shabbat Shalom. Happy Hanukkah.
Well, yes. You know, one more thing. I wanted to mention really quickly that I forgot earlier that if anyone has this, I'm going to plug the business one more time before you go, but I meant to tell you guys that there is a guy in our business that was paying $4,000 a month for his health insurance. And you're like, how is that possible? Well, because he's had cancer a couple times. And can you imagine having cancer? Do you know how many insurance groups are going to take you on? And he's self-employed. So being self-employed, trying to buy health insurance, the guy was paying $4,000 a month to cover him after having cancer. So real quick, our company does have health insurance, and he was able to get his self-employed health insurance through 7K Metals for $400 a month, down from $4,000. So there's still other benefits that people don't think of besides the gold and silver. Totally unrelated to what we were just talking about. But I just got a call from somebody, well, Tony Hubbard tonight, telling me that story, and I just was like, man, that's just crazy. People are losing their jobs right now. If you don't have any other reason to tell them about this business, it's that they're losing their jobs and they don't have income, they don't have health insurance. Or maybe there's somebody that can't afford it because they've got some history of medical conditions that people won't cover. So obviously, you can even have something like cancer and still get covered at a way better price through this business. So people who think I'm selling what do we say? People thought on Zen Garcia, oh, this is an infomercial and stuff like that. It's not. It's to try to help other people. I mean, if you knew somebody that was paying $4,000 a month for health insurance and you could get them $400, wouldn't you tell them? So think
It's
about
kinda like
that.
a club, really. in a
Yeah.
sense.
Well, it's membership benefits. It's like this is the thing. You get benefits because you're a member, and you would tell people not because you're an infomercial, but because you care to help them. So I wanted to mention that earlier. I just remembered, so I thought I'd throw that out there real quick before saying goodnight completely. But otherwise,
Totally understand.
well, and I totally appreciate you. So next Friday will be you and me and Gary, and tomorrow morning is me and Phil Baker and BDK, and Sunday is a Bigfoot special, which I've never done before. So you might want to be there for that, because I'll probably be falling all over myself with mistakes about Bigfoot, because I don't know anything about it. All right, well, peace and love. Good night.
Farewell. Shabbat Shalom.
Meow.
I am not of this world that we live in. That makes me an alien. Alienated. That makes me an alien. Alienated. That makes me an alien. I am not of this world that we live in. That makes me an alien. Alienated. That makes me an alien. Alienated. That makes me an alien. I am not of this world. When they see me coming, most people turn around and start to running because they find it strange. I speak another language because I was adopted by the God of changes. The old man into a new creature. Don't mess with men in black because they try to heat you with this thing called temptation. Have you go into a world called damnation. And on this earth there's a lot of us. I am not alone. Bunch of ETs waiting on the phone home. And when the call's answered, we gone in the rapture. Warp speed, faster than the Enterprise can catch us. Don't call no Will Smith, he cannot save the day. Jesus set me free, Independence Day. And if you wanna know which world I come from, it's not on the map, but it's near the sun. I am not of this world that we live in. That makes me an alien. Alienated. That makes me an alien. Alienated. That makes me an alien. I am not of this world that we live in.
That makes me an alien. Alienated. That makes me an alien. Alienated. That makes me an alien.
I'm a foreigner, a visitor, a stranger to this earth. I made my journey here by the way of second birth. Not through the womb, but by his spirit and his grace. Transform me from within because I'm from another place. Metamorphosis, mutations, he made modifications. He changed me from within and created alterations. Emerged and reborn my human form as an illusion. The only thing close to proof of evolution. This body will decay, I'm a temporary resident. My soul is eternal, separated from the elements. I've mutated, I'm a stranger, I'm a new man. A traveler and a tourist to this crazy land. You cross a path with some creatures from another place. And if you ask us how we got here, we will say by grace. We're not the type you think that fly around in spaceships. We follow Christ and unlike them we really exist.
I am not of this world that we live in. That makes me an alien. Alienated. That makes me an alien. Alienated. That makes me an alien. I am not of this world that we live in. That makes me an alien. Alienated. That makes me an alien. Alienated. That makes me an alien.